Hello, and welcome back to Zenin Fanfics. Today we're starting part 4 of an exciting new series. What if Deku gained power to create Quirk? If you enjoy this video, please like and subscribe for more content. The story we're featuring is written by the Ultimate One on fanfiction.net. You can find all the relevant links in the description, so be sure to check out the author's profile and say hello. Now let's dive into the story. Team A, Izuku Yagi, Reiko Yanagi, Setsuna Tokage, and Shurhei Kurwaro. Team B, Tinya Ida, Katsuki Bakugo, Nito Monoma, and Juzo Hinanuki. Team C, Achiko Uraraka, Fumikage Tokoyami, Yui Kodai, and Tetsu. Team D, Hantasiro, Kyokujiro, Sun Kaibara, and Hiryu Rin. Team E, Momo Yazu, Mina Ashido, Ichiro Yagi, and Manga Fukudashi. Team F, Tsu Ajui, Denki Kaminari, Itsuka Kendo, and Yosetsu Aways. Team G, Minoru Mineta, Injiro Kurishima, Jiroda Shishida, and Inori Yagi. Team H, Rikido Sato, Yuga Aoyama, Pony Tsunatori, and Ibara Shiozaki. Team I, Mashreo Ojuro, Mizo Shoji, Koji Koda, and Kozai Tsubiraba. Team J, Shoto Todoroki, Toru Hagakure, Kinoko Komori, and Kojiro Bondo. Izuku's POV. Team J, Heroes, versus Team F, Villains. The fights were amazing just for the fact that not one of them was the same. Team F had Tsu Ajui with her frog-like abilities, Denki Kaminari who could unleash bursts of electricity, Itsuka Kendo with her immense strength, and Yosetsu Aways who could link objects together to create barriers. On the other side, Team J had Shoto Todoroki with his dual elemental powers, Toru Hagakure who was invisible, Kinoko Komori who could create spores, and Kojiro Bondo who could stick to anything with his adhesive skin. Something I hadn't expected was for it to be done within a matter of moments, as Todoroki used the ice portion of his quirk to freeze the entire building. The hero team in a matter of moments had won the game, making it one of the quickest matches. Bondo did attempt to fight back, but the ice spread around him, preventing him from fighting. I did find out Tsu has the same ability as a frog to go into hibernation when it gets cold, so that was interesting. But in the end, Team F's efforts to stop them were futile, and Team J won in the end. Team I, Heroes, versus Team B, Villains. I couldn't help but be amazed at how quickly the battles escalated as I observed the match between Team I and Team B. It was a real clash of styles, with each side bringing their unique quirks to the forefront. Ojiro's powerful tail was an advantage in close combat. Shoji's multiple arms were great for both offense and defense. Koda's animal communication was always a wild card, and Tsubiraba could use his air manipulation to control the battlefield. On the other hand, Team B had a dynamic mix with Ida's speed from his engines made him a lightning-fast opponent, while Bakugo was a force of destruction with his explosive powers. Monoma's ability to copy quirks was always a wild card, and Hinanuki, with his ability to manipulate the area around him by softening. Out the gate, I went into a 4-man cell, try to overpower them. It was a smart strategy, but Team B was ready. Monoma had copied the quirk of Hinanuki, so there were 2 people using the quirk softening. When they were charging down the hallway to the room the bomb was in, Bakugo attacked brashly and charged in at the 4 heroes in training. He sent a wave of explosions their way as he smirked, hitting them. "You guys are weak," Bakugo taunted, his confidence radiating as he propelled himself forward with another explosion, landing right in front of Shoji. Shoji raised his multiple arms defensively, using them as shields against Bakugo's relentless assault. "We're not done yet," Shoji said, gritting his teeth as he pushed back against the sheer force of Bakugo's attacks. We then saw he went wide-eyed as his team started to sink slowly into the ground. Try as they might, they were not getting out of there. Down the hall, Monoma and Hinanuki were softening the ground and walls around them. Bakugo's frustration was palpable as he whipped around to glare at Monoma and Hinanuki, who were calmly continuing their strategy. "What the hell are you 2 doing?" he shouted, sparks crackling in his palms. "I had them cornered." Monoma, ever the provocateur, smirked back at Bakugo. Relax, Bakugo. The game is about winning, not just blowing things up. We're securing the victory. Hinanuki nodded in agreement, his hands pressed to the ground as the terrain continued to soften around Team I. They're trapped now. All you need to do is finish the job, he said, his tone leveled despite Bakugo's fiery outburst. Finish the job. Bakugo snapped, his temper flaring. I was about to finish them before you two messed it up. The group of four continued to sink into the ground as the walls and floors pulled them in. The tension between Bakugo and his teammates was almost as fierce as the battle itself. Team B's combined strategy of overwhelming offense and relentless terrain manipulation was clearly working, but Bakugo's frustration threatened to disrupt their coordination. Stop whining and focus on the mission. Monoma snapped back at Bakugo, his smirk never leaving his face. We're winning because of teamwork. Try it sometime. Bakugo's eyes narrowed, sparks flickering in his palms. I don't need your teamwork. I'll win this on my own. He turned back toward Team I, who were now chest-deep in the softened ground. The two of them stopped softening the ground, and now Team I was stuck in solid rock, unable to move. God damn it, said Tsubiraba. With that, the winner of the match is Team B, said All Might through the speaker. Team H, heroes, versus Team G, villains. The matchup between Team H and Team G was a thrilling clash of raw strength, strategy, and creativity. Team H's lineup included Sato with his enhanced strength from consuming sugar, Aoyama with his flashy naval laser, Pony with her horn-homing abilities, and Ibera's unique vine-based powers. On the other side, Team G boasted Mineta's sticky balls, Kirishima's unyielding hardening, Shishida's beastly transformation, and Inori's power telekinesis quirk. As much I hate my siblings, I must admit, Inori and Ichiro are incredibly strong and smart. It took a while, but eventually, Team H found Team G in a secluded part of the building with Inori guarding the weapon. Team H launched their assault with a strong opening strategy. Sato consumed a large quantity of sugar to maximize his strength, leading the charge with his raw power. Aoyama followed closely, using his naval laser to carve a path through the hallways, while Pony and Ibera provided support from the rear. Pony's horn-homing abilities proved invaluable for scouting, while Ibera's vines created natural barriers to block off potential escape routes for the villains. In their secluded part of the building, Team G was already bracing for impact. Inori, calm and composed, stood at the ready with the weapon behind her, her telekinesis quirk active and poised to defend their position. Kirishima fortified his stance, activating his hardening quirk to become an unbreakable wall of defense. Shishida, in his beast form, growled lowly, his senses heightened and ready for the incoming clash. Mineta, uncharacteristically focused, had strategically placed his sticky balls around the room, creating traps that would hinder the hero's movements. The first clash was explosive. Sato barreled through the entrance, fists swinging with immense force. He aimed directly for Kirishima, who stood firm, and blocked the blow. The impact reverberated through the room, but Kirishima held his ground, grinning. "Is that all you've got?" he taunted, countering with a powerful punch of his own. The two engaged in a brutal hand-to-hand fight, their quirks pushing each other to their limits. Meanwhile, Pony used her horns to target Shishida, hoping to keep him occupied while Aoyama aimed his laser at the weapon. Pony's horns launched with precision, curving towards Shishida's massive form. However, his heightened senses and beastly reflexes allowed him to dodge the initial attack. "You'll have to try harder than that," he growled, leaping toward Pony with a ferocious swipe of his claws. Pony leapt back, sending another volley of horns his way, but Shishida batted them aside with a snarl, his strength overpowering her finesse. Aoyama, meanwhile, had positioned himself at an angle to fire his naval laser toward the weapon. His beam shot out in a brilliant flash, but Inori's telekinesis was swift and precise. She moved a rock in the way of a laser, stopping it. Frustrated but determined, Aoyama fired another laser, this time at Inori herself. However, She anticipated the attack, using her telekinesis to create a shield out of nearby debris. The laser struck the makeshift barrier, scattering fragments across the room. "You're wasting energy," she warned, her tone almost condescending. "Focus your efforts, or this will be over even faster." While Inori held her ground, Ibara joined the fray, her vines snaking through the room to ensnare both Shishida and Kirishima. "You won't stop us," she declared, her determination shining through as her vines wrapped tightly around Shishida's limbs. For a moment, it seemed like she had the upper hand, but Kirishima intervened, using his hardened arms to slice through the vines. "Not on my watch," he shouted, charging at Ibara. Pony tried to assist, launching her horns at Kirishima to distract him, but Minetta's traps came into play. As Pony moved to reposition herself, her foot landed on one of his sticky balls, causing her to stumble and lose her balance. "Gotcha!" Minetta cheered, throwing another handful of sticky balls in her direction. Pony struggled to free herself, her horns flailing as she tried to maintain her focus. Sato, still locked in a fierce battle with Kirishima, decided to ramp up his strength even further. He consumed another handful of sugar, his muscles bulging as his power surged. With a roar, he delivered a punch so forceful that it sent shockwaves through the room. Kirishima blocked the blow, but even his hardening quirk wasn't enough to fully absorb the impact. He skidded backward, his feet digging into the ground as he fought to regain his balance. "Not bad," Kirishima admitted, a grin spreading across his face despite the strain. "But I'm not going down that easy." He charged back at Sato, the two of them clashing in a flurry of punches that shook the very walls of the building. As the battle intensified, Inori took a more active role. She used her telekinesis to lift several pieces of debris and hurled them toward Aoyama and Ibara. Aoyama tried to shoot the debris out of the air with his laser, but his energy reserves were running low, and his shots became increasingly inaccurate. Ibara used her vines to shield herself, but the sheer force of Inori's attacks pushed her back, making it difficult for her to maintain her offensive. Realizing the tide was turning against them, Pony made one last-ditch effort to break free from Minetta's traps. She summoned all her strength, launching a flurry of horns in every direction. Some of them struck Shishida, causing him to stumble, while others flew toward Inori and the weapon. However, Inori was quick to react, using her telekinesis to deflect the horns away from their target. "You're persistent," Inori acknowledged, her tone calm, but with a hint of respect. "But this is the end." She raised her hand, using her telekinesis to lift Pony off the ground and pin her against the wall. Pony struggled, but the force holding her was too strong. Meanwhile, Sato, now running on adrenaline, managed to land a solid hit on Kirishima, sending him crashing into the floor. But before he could capitalize on his advantage, Minetta's sticky balls came into play once again. Sato's foot got caught, and he found himself unable to move. "Damn it," he cursed, struggling against the adhesive trap. With Sato immobilized, Shishida recovered and lunged at Ibara, his claws tearing through her remaining vines. She tried to fight back, but the combined pressure from Shishida and Minetta was too much. She was soon subdued, leaving only Aoyama as the last standing member of Team H. Aoyama, his energy nearly depleted, fired one final laser in a desperate attempt. The beam arced through the air, but Inori was ready. She threw debris with her telekinesis and redirected it back toward Aoyama, forcing him to dodge and lose his footing. "I might call it," Inori declared, her voice echoing through the room. She stood tall in front of the weapon, her teammates having successfully subdued all members of Team H. Team G has secured the victory. I still can't tell if she is like this all the time or in battle. Even if it's been a few days, she hasn't said a word to me other than she is sorry. Regardless, I got good notes to put in for later. Now was the final match. Team E Heroes versus Team D Villains. I could give credit to Ichiro because he did something that I never expected, and that was do something right away. Ichiro activated his Impact Level 5 almost immediately. The surge of energy transformed him into a blur of motion as he dashed through the building, a trail of shockwaves left in his wake. His speed and strength at this level were incredible, and it was clear that he intended to make an immediate impact. If I had to guesstimate, his impact level 5 was about the equivalent of 12 to 15% of One for All. In a matter of 30 seconds, Ichiro had gone so fast he got to the bomb room and tied everyone up before they were even out of the hallway to start the mission. Similar to Todoroki, the match was done in the blink of an eye. At a blinding speed, I saw Ichiro tie the villains up. I made sure to activate full cowling to see it. The sudden conclusion of the match left the entire class stunned. Ichiro stood in the center of the bomb room, his breathing steady despite the overwhelming speed he had just demonstrated. The villains were tied up in a neat bundle, their expressions a mix of confusion and disbelief. The dust settled in the air as the echoes of his movements faded into silence. Did that really just happen? Ciro murmured, his voice barely above a whisper as he looked at the screen. Oops, I got carried away, he said, smirking. His teammates approached cautiously, a mix of awe and annoyance in their expressions. Carried away? You didn't even give us a chance to help. Mina complained, crossing her arms. I can't help I'm that good, he said, holding his hands out and walking away with an over-cocky grin on his face. I guess this is what happens when you praise someone their whole life about their quirk. Thank God he didn't turn out like them. But at least I got some good notes to put into my hero analysis for later. Third-person POV. All Might congratulated everyone on a job well done before bolting off, and now it was time for some downtime for both heroics classes. They had the rest of the day off for themselves, and Izuku was glad. He had debated on training to see how Black Whip, F.A. Jean, and Danger since evolved, but decided not to worry his friends about where he was at. He got out of his room after putting on some clothes and went downstairs to chill out for a bit. He walked past some students and went into the kitchen to get something to eat. He investigated the fridge and pulled out a fruit bowl. He felt someone behind him, and when he turned around, he saw the floating head of Setsuna. He jumped slightly as she started to snicker at him. Izuku let out a nervous chuckle, holding the fruit bowl close to his chest. Tokage, you scared me, he exclaimed, his heart still racing from the sudden encounter. Sorry, Yagi, couldn't resist, she said with a wink. You looked so focused on that fruit bowl. I had to see if I could break your concentration. Besides, call me Setsuna. I don't do that formal stuff. Izuku relaxed slightly, setting the fruit bowl on the counter. Well, mission accomplished, he said, smiling. She giggled as she leaned on the counter. You're going to be so much fun to tease, she said. Izuku's cheeks flushed at Setsuna's playful comment, and he fumbled for a response. I guess I'm glad I can provide some entertainment, he said, trying to match her lighthearted tone. She chuckled manically as she skipped out of the room, leaving him confused. Great, just what I need right now. Another person teasing me, he said, walking out of the room and pulling out his hero analysis to sit at a nearby table. He decided to review his classmates' profiles on their quirks, as well as Class B. He opened his book and started getting to work based on the info he gathered and asked about. Not to mention they had discussed their quirks on the first day of coming here, so he couldn't help but jot down the info. Thankfully, he didn't need to write down any of his friends, as he already had Shoji, Jiro, Momo, Tokoimi, and Ibara. He even had Bakugo and his siblings, but he would come back to those three later. As he ate his fruit bowl, he looked around to see every conversing with one another and started to get in a large group. He sighed as he finished the last fruit in the bowl and went to throw it away. Izuku tossed the empty fruit bowl into the trash as he glanced around the common area. His eyes scanned the faces of his classmates as they mingled, chatting amongst themselves. Some were talking about the day's mission, others discussing their quirks and possible ways to improve. The atmosphere was light, filled with laughter and the occasional joke, but Izuku couldn't shake the feeling of being somewhat disconnected. He had spent so much time focusing on improving himself and understanding his quirks that he sometimes forgot to connect with his peers outside of class. He then heard something that he thought he wouldn't hear for a while. Hey, handsome, a feminine voice said in English. Izuku looked around, trying to see if that was for him or not. He then heard the same voice as he still looked around. I knew it. He knows English. He then heard what sounded like galloping as a girl with horns stood in front of him. She had horse features and looked at him happily. "You speak English?" she asked with a megawatt smile. Yes," he said, and was then picked up by said girl and twirled into the air. Izuku's eyes widened in shock as the girl effortlessly lifted him off the ground, twirling him in the air. His fruit bowl momentarily slipped from his hands, his heart racing from the unexpected motion. "Whoa, hey," he yelped, flailing slightly, unsure of how to react to this sudden whirlwind of energy. The girl laughed as she spun him around, clearly enjoying the playful interaction. "Don't worry, I won't drop you," she said, her voice carrying a cheerful tone that made it sound like she was having the time of her life. Her horns, protruding from either side of her head, added an element of wildness to her already exuberant energy. Her horse-like features only seemed to add to her undeniable charm. Once she finally stopped spinning him, she gently placed him back on his feet, giving him a quick pat on the head. Izuku's face was now a deep shade of red, partly from the sudden dizzying spin and partly from the embarrassment of being picked up so easily. "Sorry about that. Didn't mean to startle you. My name's Pony Tsunatori, but you could just call me Pony," she said, still grinning widely. "The reason I'm over here was I spoke English earlier in battle training, and you looked at me, which got me thinking you spoke it. And you did. Do you mind me asking how you know English?" she asked, bouncing around him, making him blush slightly at how energetic she was. "My name is Izuku Yagi. Well, my father went to the United States for about 4 years. He taught me and my siblings when we were young, so we knew Japanese and English fluently," he said, trying to get closer to him. "That's so cool. I am learning Japanese myself, and I'm mostly fluent, but still struggle from time to time. Could you help me learn it when I ask for help every now and then?" she asked excitedly. Izuku blinked in surprise at her request, feeling a little taken aback by her enthusiasm. Sure. I can help if you need it," he said, trying to keep his composure despite the sudden attention. "I'm sure you're doing great with your Japanese already." "Oh my gosh. Thank you, handsome," she said in English once more, making him blush once more as she skipped away happy as can be. "Women are weird," he said simply as he started to get and find something to do. Now that he thought about it, women really are interesting. Kyoka is different from Momo, Momo is different from Ibra, and she's different from Setsuna, and so on. Izuku sat down on one of the couches in the common area, still a little disoriented from the whirlwind encounter with Pony. He shook his head and chuckled to himself. "Women are definitely different," he muttered quietly, thinking about his classmates and the unique personalities each of them had. He then felt someone over him, and he looked up to see a giant person that he recognized as Hound Dog. He looked up at him wondering what he was going to say. "Are you Izuku Yagi?" he asked gruffly, but it had a tinge of softness to it. "Yes, sir," said Izuku, giving him his full attention. "All right then, come with me," he said as he gestured to one of the quiet rooms next to the common room. Izuku stood up immediately, sensing the seriousness in Hound Dog's tone. The massive hero led him to one of the quieter rooms adjacent to the common area. As they entered, Izuku noticed the stark contrast between the lively common area and the calm, almost somber atmosphere of the room. The space was modestly furnished, with a simple table and a couple of chairs. Hound Dog motioned for Izuku to sit down, and the green-haired boy obeyed without hesitation. Izuku's mind raced, wondering what this was about. Did he do something wrong? Was there an issue with his performance in class, or on a mission? Hound Dog pulled out a chair opposite him and sat down. Despite his gruff appearance, his presence was more comforting than intimidating. He rested his elbows on the table and clasped his hands together, his sharp eyes focused on Izuku. "Relax, kid," Hound Dog said, his voice low but kind. "You're not in trouble." Izuku exhaled a breath he hadn't realized he was holding. "Thank you, sir. I was worried for a moment." Hound Dog's lips curved into a small, amused smirk. "I get that a lot." He paused, his expression shifting to something more serious. "I called you in here to talk about your progress, but do not worry you. We're first on my list of talking to me. I need to talk to all 40 of you here, so I might as well start now, so I can get home to the wife," he said as he pulled out some papers and his reading glasses. "Talk about what, sir?" he said curiously. Well, I need to tell you that I am everyone's guidance counselor, and I'm here to make sure you all are doing well. Not just academically or in your hero training, but emotionally and mentally too, Hound Dog explained, adjusting his glasses and flipping through his papers. Your progress is important, but so is your well-being, Yagi. A good hero doesn't just have strength. They have the resilience to handle the challenges life throws at them. Izuku nodded, his curiosity piqued. I understand, sir. I appreciate you taking the time to check in with me. Good. So, my first question is what type of hero would like to be? There are a few types we have. There are combat heroes, which are self-explanatory. They deal with villains directly, using their quirk to fight, subdue, or neutralize threats whether it is indoors or outdoors. Then, we have rescue heroes, who focus on saving civilians, especially in disaster situations such as wildfires, floods, storms, and more. They may not always get involved in the fighting, but their role is crucial during evacuations or when people are trapped in dangerous environments. Support is the largest and most broad category. A few examples are heroes who work behind the scenes, helping those in combat or rescue situations by providing equipment, strategy, or specialized knowledge. Support heroes typically have quirks that focus on creating gadgets, improving physical abilities, or offering logistical support to other heroes in the field. Some more examples include healing, interrogation, tracking and manhunts, recon, stealth, investigations, and even counseling. Many heroes fit in several categories like me. I fight villains as well as participate in manhunts. Do you know what type of hero you would like to be? It's fine if you don't have an answer now. You just started after all, he asked once more. I do, given how you know about my quirk already. I would like to be all three and be in as many categories as possible, he said, smiling. Hound Dog raised an eyebrow at Izuku's answer. All three? That's ambitious. But I admire the drive. A hero with the ability to contribute to multiple areas is certainly valuable. But, Izuku, do you understand what that might entail? It's one thing to want to be versatile, but it takes more than just a desire to help in every category. You'll have to train not just physically, but also mentally and emotionally. You'll need to learn the ins and outs of each role and how to prioritize them when the situation calls for it. Izuku's smile widened slightly, his determination clear. I understand, sir. I want to be a hero who's capable in every situation, whether it's directly fighting a villain or saving people from danger. I know it'll take a lot of work, but I'm willing to put in that effort. Hound Dog studied him for a moment, seeming to consider something. You remind me of a lot of other students who have big aspirations. A good goal, sure, but remember, your quirk alone isn't going to define your path. You'll need to master the mental aspects of each role, too. Being able to adapt your mindset, depending on whether you're in a rescue, combat, or support scenario, is just as important as your physical strength or skill. Izuku nodded, taking in the advice. So, it's not just about being physically strong. I need to understand the right mindset for each role. Like, a combat hero might need to focus on offense and defense, but a rescue hero needs to keep a level head and prioritize saving people, even if there's danger around them. Exactly, Hound Dog agreed. You'll need to adjust your approach depending on what you're doing. A rescue hero often has to think quickly to ensure everyone is safe, especially in dangerous environments like natural disasters or large-scale villain attacks. It's not always about how fast or powerful you are. It's about making the right decisions in the moment. But I like you guts, kid. I know you can do it, he said, writing down what Izuku said. Izuku felt a rush of determination after hearing Hound Dog's words. The idea of balancing the roles of combat, rescue, and support seemed like a daunting challenge, but it also fueled his desire to push himself further. Thank you, sir, Izuku said, his voice steady. I won't let you down. I'll work as hard as I can to become a hero who can handle any situation. Hound Dog nodded, his expression softening. I believe you, but I have another question for you. Would you like to talk about your conflicts with your siblings, family, Bakugo, and your middle school? Izuku frowned slightly. He knew Hound Dog was like a therapist, but still, this was a bit of an open wound. Well, our relationship is pretty complicated, he said, scratching the back of his head. It's a lot of stuff to go over. So, much that I wouldn't be able to explain here, he said, looking at Hound Dog. Hound Dog gave Izuku a thoughtful look, his eyes assessing, but not pressing. He gave a small nod of understanding, his voice gentle but firm. I get it. You don't have to dive into everything all at once. But it's important to address these things, Izuku. A lot of the time, we carry things from our past into our future, and if we don't deal with them, they can end up affecting our growth. Not just as people, but as heroes too. Would like to say something from the beginning to get off your chest? Izuku nodded. I guess I can. When we want to get our quirk tests, we were all so excited. Long story short, my results came back quirkless, and they showed Ichiro's and Inori's quirks. The looks on my mom and dad's face were disappointed. They didn't say anything, but I could see it in their eyes. And when they showed Ichiro's and Inori's quirks, I felt like I didn't belong. They were both so powerful, so full of potential. And then there was me. Nothing. No quirk. Not until later anyway. Hound Dog leaned forward, his eyes never leaving Izuku's face. That must have been incredibly hard for you, he said quietly. Not just feeling like you let your parents down, but seeing your siblings excel in front of everyone while you were left behind. It's understandable why that experience left a mark. Izuku nodded. Yeah, I think that is the reason why I trained so hard. I don't want anyone who is my friend to give me that look. I don't want to ever do that look again. I think that was the last day that Ichiro, Inori, and I got along. Hound Dog's gaze softened, and he gave a sympathetic nod. It's understandable why you'd carry that weight with you. The look in their eyes, the feeling of being left behind, it's a hard thing to shake. It's not easy to have your worth measured by something like a quirk, something that you don't have control over. But Izuku, you need to understand that your worth doesn't lie in what you're born with. It lies in what you choose to do with what you have, and you've shown time and time again that you're willing to work harder than anyone to reach your goals. I know, sir, was all he said as he looked down to the ground. Hound Dog took out another sticky note and wrote down something. Listen, if it is fine with you, I would like for you to meet me once a week for about 30 minutes. If you want to get anything off your chest, he said, handing him the note. He looked at the note too, and it showed his hours of availability and smiled. Thank you, sir. I'll consider it, he said, getting up from his chair. That's all I ask. Oh, and don't worry, I will be doing the same for your siblings and Bakugo. That needs to be resolved, he said with finality. Izuku smiled. Thank you again, sir, he said, opening the door to leave with Hound Dog in pursuit. See you around, kid, as he went to go get another person for the interview of sorts. The hum of conversation from his classmates greeted him as he entered the common area. Most of them were lounging around or discussing their training plans. He spotted Momo and Kyoka sitting on one of the couches, reviewing some notes, while Kaminari and Kirishima were having an animated discussion about the day's combat exercise. For a moment, he just stood there, taking in the scene. Hey, Yagi, Kirishima called, waving him over with his usual bright grin. You good? You've been in there for a while. Izuku gave a sheepish chuckle as he approached. Yeah, just had a talk with Hound Dog. He's checking in with everyone to see how we're doing. Kirishima nodded knowingly. Man, that guy's intense, but in a good way, you know? He really gets what it's like to deal with the mental side of hero work. Agreed, said Kaminari. I thought I was in trouble when I went in there with him earlier, but he's a pretty chill guy, he said. They were then interrupted as Mineta spoke up over them. Oi, Yagi, said Mineta, giving him a glare, making Izuku confused. What's up, Mineta? He asked, a bit wary of him as he took an empty couch. How do you do it? He asked somewhat pleadingly. Izuku blinked in confusion, tilting his head slightly as he looked at Mineta. How do I do what? How are you a chick magnet? I swear to God you talked to Jiro, Yanagi, Setsuna, that pony girl, today like it was nothing, he said with jealousy. That's a good point, said Kaminari. Izuku blinked, his face turning red as he waved his hands in front of him frantically. Wait, it's not like that. I just talk to them like normal people. I didn't realize it seemed that way. Mineta narrowed his eyes, crossing his arms as if trying to detect any falsehood. Oh, come on. Don't play dumb, Yagi. You're always chatting with them, and they don't even seem annoyed by you. How do you pull off? I need tips. Kaminari leaned back on the couch, rubbing his chin thoughtfully. Actually, now that he mentions it, you're pretty smooth with the girls. Even Jiro doesn't get mad at you, and she's like the queen of shutting guys down. I would know. Kirishima snickered. Kaminari is just sour 'cause she turned him down earlier, he said, nudging Izuku while laughing at him. Shut up, Kirishima, said Kaminari, annoyed as he changed the channel on the TV. Kirishima laughed even harder, clearly enjoying Kaminari's embarrassment. Come on, man. I'm just messing with you. But seriously, Yagi's got this whole nice guy thing down. It's no wonder people feel comfortable around him. Izuku, still flustered, scratched the back of his neck. I really don't think it's anything special. I just try to treat everyone with respect and listen when they want to talk. That's all. Mineta rolled his eyes, leaning forward with a dramatic sigh. So basically, you're saying I should be nice and respectful? That's it. That's your secret. Kirishima shook his head at Mineta. Dude, I don't even know a lot about women, and that is common sense. I mean, look at Yagi right here, he said, putting his hands on his shoulders. He is respectful and caring towards everyone, and that is why everyone likes him. I guarantee you women will fight for his attention down the line. Mineta groaned dramatically, flopping back onto the couch as though Kirishima's words had physically knocked him over. That's too much work, he whined, earning another round of groans and facepalms from the group. Kirishima grinned, patting Izuku's shoulders in an exaggerated display of admiration. See, Yagi? You're setting the bar for us guys. A true example of manliness. Izuku's face burned as he stammered. I don't think it's anything that's special. Really, I just treat people how I'd want to be treated. Sure, man, it doesn't make it any more annoying that you have like 5 females looking at you right now, said Kaminari, showing him the girls staring at him from the distance. Izuku's face turned a deeper shade of red as he quickly glanced toward the direction Kaminari was pointing. Sure enough, several of his female classmates were looking in their direction. When their eyes met his, most of them quickly turned away, pretending to be engrossed in whatever they were doing. Momo even raised a book to hide her face, while Jiro casually adjusted her earphone jacks with a suspiciously nonchalant air. Mina gave a small wave before scurrying off. It's not like that. Izuku stammered, waving his hands in front of him. They're probably just curious because we're talking so loudly. Right? Sure, dude. Just sit down and watch some TV with us, said Mineta, pouting. A few hours later, Izuku was chilling out and lying in his room. He was going to do training in a bit after everyone went to sleep, but he couldn't wait any more and decided to do it now. Izuku got up from his bed with a small sigh, stretching his arms above his head. He decided that he would test out Black Whip and his other quirks to see how they evolved, so to speak. He was in a black tank top and black shorts and stepped into one of the training rooms close to the gym. Izuku stepped into the training room, the soft hum of the lights above and the faint smell of rubber mats filling the space. The room was quiet, empty save for him, which was exactly how he liked it during these late-night sessions. It was a chance to focus, to push himself without distractions. He opened his eyes, determination gleaming in them. First up, Black Whip. He extended a tendril of Black Whip, once more feeling that it was a bit different feeling to him. He could still use 5 tendrils for a long period. 5 tendrils, steady as usual, Izuku muttered to himself, watching the whips extend and sway in the air like living shadows. But can I push it further? He clenched his fist, focusing on summoning a 6th tendril. For a moment, nothing happened, but then, with a spark of effort, another tendril shot out, flickering slightly before stabilizing. Izuku's eyes widened in surprise and excitement. 6. I did it, he said, grinning. But his celebration was short-lived as the extra tendril wavered, unstable, before dissipating into smoke. Izuku winced, feeling the strain ripple through his arm. Still not there yet, he muttered, shaking out his hand. But progress is progress. Izuku retracted 4 of his tendrils and only had 1 out flinging around. He felt something telling him to do this, but he thought of this tendril splitting into 2. It was weird, almost like something from inside telling him. Izuku focused on the single tendril of Black Whip flicking back and forth in the air, the dark energy crackling faintly as it obeyed his commands. The strange feeling persisted, almost like a whisper in the back of his mind, urging him to try something different. Splitting one tendril into two, he muttered to himself, his brow furrowing in concentration. Is that even possible? He stared intently at the single tendril, imagining it splitting apart. At first, nothing happened. The tendril wavered slightly, but it remained whole. Izuku clenched his fist tighter, his focus unwavering as he poured more of his will into the idea. Slowly, the energy began to ripple, the tendril quivering as if resisting his command. Then, with a faint crackle, the tendril split into two tendrils, both snaking through the air independently. Izuku's eyes widened in shock and excitement. "It worked!" he exclaimed, his voice echoing in the empty room. He moved the two tendrils around, testing their flexibility and range. They were slightly less stable than the original, but they moved fluidly, responding to his thoughts as if they were extensions of his own limbs. "This could be useful," he said, a grin spreading across his face. "If I can master this, I could use Black Whip in even more creative ways, capturing multiple targets or creating a defensive barrier." "Oh, training late at night, are we?" said a familiar voice. Izuku turned around to see it was Bakugo, with Ichiro leaning against the wall with a calm gaze. What's up?" said Izuku, confused, retracting his tendrils. "What the hell are you doing, nerd?" Bakugo demanded, his crimson eyes narrowing as he stepped closer. "Well, I am in the training room, so what do you think I'm doing?" Izuku asked sarcastically. "Don't get smart with me, fucker," yelled Bakugo. "Guys, what do you want? I'm trying to train, and what? No Inori, so you guys can jump me like you did several times before," said Izuku, not wanting to deal with their shit right now. Ichiro scoffed. "Nope, she didn't want to bother you," she said. That confused him. Normally, his sister was a huge pain in his ass, but I guess not. "Deku, fight me," said Bakugo, using explosions in his hand. "No. Yes. No. Yes. Bakugo, I am not fighting you. It is a waste of my time," he said, trying to leave. Bakugo's expression darkened, his hand sparking dangerously as he blocked Izuku's path. "You're not going anywhere, nerd," he growled. "You think you're too good to fight me now? Is that it? You said it yourself." "Hell, you Ichiro," and Inori said so many times that I will never be good enough. "You have told me time and time again. So, you already have your answer," he said, moving around him. Ichiro stood in his way this time and smirked. "Yeah, sorry, little bro, we ain't done," he said. "That's all right, because I am," he said as he activated Jolt, speed blitzing past the two of them. "Damn it, Deku!" Bakugo roared, his voice echoing down the hall. Ichiro, who was still standing by the door, shook his head with an amused smile. "Well, that was one way to get out of it," he muttered to himself. "I'm not even mad," he said, kind of surprised. "Shut it, Ichiro," said Bakugo as he stomped out of the room, frustrated. Izuku had Jolt activated as he ran to his room, sighing as he was about to open the door. He looked down and tilted his head as there was a tiny basket of mushrooms there. Izuku stared at the basket of mushrooms in confusion, his brow furrowing. He looked around the hallway, half expecting to see someone watching him, but it was empty. The small basket was neatly placed, the mushrooms inside varying in size and color, ranging from pale white to deep purple. There was no note, no indication of who left them there. He bent down cautiously, inspecting the mushrooms more closely. "Weird," he muttered under his breath. "Who would leave these here?" There was a note on the side of the basket, and he looked at it. It said it was from Kinoko, and he read the note. "Hi, Yagi. I noticed how hard you've been working lately, so I thought you might like these. They're safe, I promise. I grow them myself, and they're supposed to help with energy and focus. Hope they help. Komori." Izuku smiled as he read the note. "I'll need to thank her tomorrow," he said, opening the door and entering his room. There was a brown-haired girl who peeked around the corner, blushing slightly. Kinoko could only hope he liked the gift. Then again, she could have just spoken to him, which would have saved the issue, but she didn't know how to approach this. She quietly scurried off. The next morning, everyone in Class 1 was sitting in their room and waiting for teaching. Izuku was jotting down his ideas for Black Whip from his training and the possibilities of evolving. F.A. Jean seemed like it was the same for now. Anyway, same thing with Danger Sense. He was glad to hear that Chase said everything was all good now, and he was able to use 50% of one for all once more, and he was grateful for it. He was interrupted as someone plopped themselves on his desk. He looked to see Mina smirking at him. "So, Yagi, what are you doing?" she asked, trying to peek, but Izuku hid it under his desk. Izuku sighed, tilting his head to look at Mina. "Just some notes on my quirk," he said casually, trying to keep her curiosity at bay. He wasn't in the mood for a long conversation about his training, especially since it was still a work in progress. Mina leaned closer, her smirk widening. "Oh, come on, Yagi. You've been scribbling away like a mad scientist. You gotta share. Is it some kind of secret quirk strategy?" Izuku shook his head, stuffing the notebook deeper into his bag. "Not really. Just ideas for improvements. It's nothing big." Sure, she said, leaning over towards him, making him blush slightly. "So, you're some big smarty, strong, capable, and a bunch of other things, huh?" she said, continuing to lean in more. "Well, I guess when you put it like that, I guess I am," he said, leaning back in his chair. Mina's grin widened as she saw the faintest blush spread across Izuku's cheeks. "You know, Yagi, it's not just about being smart and capable. You've been pretty quiet about a lot of things lately. You're always helping everyone, but no one really asks about you." "Well, I just want to help others," he said. Some of the girls started to get a bit jealous of Mina. They knew she knew what she was doing. "All right, class, sit down and get in your seats," said Aizawa calmly. The class quickly settled down as Aizawa's commanding tone filled the room. Even Mina, who had been leaning on Izuku's desk moments earlier, backed off with a cheeky grin, mouthing, "We'll talk later," before slipping into her seat. Izuku took a deep breath, grateful for the temporary reprieve, though he could still feel the gazes of some of his classmates lingering on him. "Today," Aizawa began, his eyes scanning the room, "will be a day that will affect you all for the rest of your lives," he said, dramatically scaring the students. "Today we will vote for your class president," he said, making everyone sigh in relief before everyone burst into conversation. The classroom erupted into chatter at Aizawa's announcement. Some students seemed thrilled, others apprehensive, but nearly everyone had an opinion on who should take the coveted role of class president. Izuku knew the importance of this, as it could give you more offers from other agencies in the future because of how they see you as a leader. "Everyone please," said Ida, standing up. "Let's do a vote to see who the class rep and vice rep will be," he said, pulling out some papers. The room gradually quieted as Ida's commanding voice cut through the chatter. He stood at the front of the room, his posture rigid and hands holding a stack of blank papers. "This is an important decision," he continued. "The roles of class president and vice president will reflect not only our class's discipline, but also our ability to unite as future heroes. Please consider carefully before casting your votes." "Wait, but we've only known each other for like 3 days. How will that be good?" asked Azui as Ida spoke again. "That is exactly why this vote is important," Ida declared, his voice firm and passionate. "Although we have only known each other for a short time, this exercise will help us begin to understand and recognize the qualities of leadership within our peers. It is also an essential part of our growth as heroes." Tsuyu tilted her head thoughtfully. "I guess that makes sense, Ribbit." Bakugo snorted from his seat, slouching in apparent disinterest. "This is a waste of time. Just give me the damn job already. I'm the strongest one here." "You'd lead us straight into chaos," Jiro muttered, rolling her eyes. "No thanks." Aizawa stepped into his sleeping bag and sighed. "Just take the vote before the bell goes off." "I'm going to take a nap," he said, falling down, making everyone sweat drop at their teacher. Soon the votes were in, and a surprised Izuku and happy Momo were standing in the front of the class. "All right, that's 7 votes for Izuku Yagi and 3 votes for Momo Yaozu," Aizawa mumbled, barely lifting his head from his sleeping bag. "We have our class president and vice president. Yagi, Yaozu, congratulations. Don't make me regret this." Lunchtime. Izuku was scarfing down his food as he sat with Uraraka, Ida, Jiro, Kirishima, and Momo in the cafeteria. He tried to focus on his meal, but his mind was racing with thoughts of what this new responsibility would mean. He didn't 100% doubt himself, but he found it weird to think about people believing he was a leader. Izuku, you might want to slow down, said Momo, surprised that he was already on his thirds. But I'm hungry, he said to her, wiping his mouth. Momo chuckled softly, watching as Izuku quickly polished off another bowl of food. I understand, but you'll need your energy for more than just eating, Yagi. As class president, you'll have a lot on your plate, figuratively speaking. Yeah, but it looks like he's got a lot on his plate literally too. Kirishima joked, laughing as he motioned to Izuku's nearly empty tray. All right, fine. I guess Momo wants me to starve, said Izuku, putting his chopsticks down. You know that is not what I meant, she said, smiling softly. Nope, it's too late, said Izuku, playing into the role while pushing his plate away. Wow. Momo, you trying to starve Izuku? That's mean, said Jiro, smirking. Okay, guys, I get it. I was just worried about him overeating and not getting the proper nutrition, she said, pouting as she looked away. The table erupted into laughter, and Izuku, still blushing slightly from the teasing, picked up his chopsticks again. Don't worry, Momo. I'll take care of myself. I'll even pace myself next time. Good, she said, her pout fading into a smile as she resumed eating. Izuku looked to Ida, who was quiet for a while looking at him. Say, Ida, is your brother ingenium? Ida coughed spastically as he looked at Izuku with wide eyes. Yeah, how did you know? You guys have very similar quirks. It was only natural, he said, shrugging. Ida looked at Izuku with a mix of surprise and pride. I hadn't thought about it like that, but you're right. Our quirks are very similar, although I've tried to hone mine in a more precise way. Ingenium's quirk, however, has become a symbol of speed and reliability in the public eye. It's an honor, really. Izuku nodded thoughtfully. It must be amazing to have a hero in the family. Do you feel like you have to live up to that? Ida's face softened, and he let out a small sigh, glancing down at his meal. There's always pressure, but my brother has always been supportive of me. He's never pushed me to follow in his footsteps. Instead, he encourages me to be the best version of myself. It's a reminder that heroes aren't just defined by their quirks or achievements. It's the heart behind the actions that matter. I agree, but I assure you that you are on your way to making your brother proud, he said, giving a thumbs up. Ida smiled slightly, his posture straightening with encouragement. Thank you, Yagi. That means a lot. Sometimes, I do wonder if I'm doing enough, especially considering the expectations that come with being his brother. But I try to remind myself that I'm on my own path. We're both trying to protect people, just in our own ways. The students were interrupted from their conversations when an alarm went off. Students started to panic, and Ida grabbed one of them. What's going on? He asked demandingly. Not sure, but this is a level 3 security threat, meaning that someone broke into the campus. This hasn't happened in 3 years, he said, breaking free of his grip and running away from them. We should get out of here, said Kirishima. The others followed suit, and they encountered a problem immediately. The hallway was flooded with people, and there was hysteria everywhere. Izuku's heart raced as he scanned the chaos unfolding before him. Students were pushing past one another, frantic and panicked. The flood of people seemed endless, and the hallway had become a sea of shouting voices, frantic footsteps, and fear. It was difficult to even move in the direction they needed to go. Every one of the groups was soon pulled in as they were being dragged down the hall. Izuku struggled to stay to wall, but to many people were Izuku, Jiro, and Momo up against the wall and decided to head to them. Izuku didn't waste a second. He pushed forward again, his quirk-enhanced strength giving him an advantage as he managed to slip past a few more students. Finally, he reached them, breathing heavily. Are you two okay? He asked quickly, looking them both over for any signs of injury or distress. We're fine, but this is bad, Jiro said, her usual cool demeanor slipping as she glanced nervously at the crowds. There's a break-in, and no one knows what's happening. We need to stay out of the way, but we can't just sit here. Izuku tried to speak, but was pushed when someone bumped into his back and fell into Jiro and Momo. Izuku blushed as he realized he put his hands up to stop the fall, and his hands were on their breasts. Jiro, who had been the first to recover, gave him an understanding look, though her face was tinged pink from the awkwardness. It's all right, Izuku, she said, her voice slightly strained but trying to keep the mood light. It was just an accident. Momo, too, looked at him with an understanding expression, though she seemed to be holding back a smile. "We know it wasn't intentional, Izuku." "Yagi!" yelled Ida as he reached for a handout, and Izuku pulled him over with a blush on his face still. "There is media outside on the campus right now." "That is what signaled the break-in," said Ida. Izuku's eyes widened at Ida's words, his thoughts racing. "Media?" "Yes, we need to tell everyone, so we can all calm down," said Ida, pushing off a student who ran into him. "What should we do?" asked Momo as she scooted next to the wall more. Izuku took a deep breath and activated Black Whip, the black tendrils of energy shooting upward to latch onto the pipes above. His movements were deliberate, his focus sharp. He knew he needed to take control of the situation before the chaos spiraled further. "Listen," he shouted, his voice cutting through the cacophony of panic. The sight of his Black Whip quirk caught the attention of several students nearby, causing them to pause momentarily in their rush. "There's no reason to panic. This isn't a villain attack. It's just the media outside. Everyone, stay calm and move towards the designated evacuation points in an orderly manner." His voice carried with surprising authority, and though some students continued to push through the crowd, a noticeable number began to slow down, looking around with a bit more clarity. Izuku swung himself closer to the pipes, steadying his position so he could better address the hallway. Everyone soon came to a halt and started to walk rather than run, and they even saw the media outside. Izuku sighed as everyone calmed down and he slowly descended from pipes to land next to his friends. Izuku landed gracefully, the tendrils of Black Whip retreating into his arm. His shoulders sagged with relief as the crowd's hysteria gradually gave way to a more controlled flow of students walking toward the evacuation points. He turned to face Momo, Jiro, and Ida, his heart still racing, but his mind sharp. "Nice quick thinking, Yagi," said Ida. "Yeah, thanks," he said before turning to Momo and Jiro, bowing repeatedly. "Guys, I am so sorry. I really didn't mean to do that," he said. Momo gently placed a hand on Izuku's shoulder to stop his bowing. "Izuku, it's okay." "Really?" she said, her voice soft but firm. "We know it was an accident, and we don't blame you." Jiro crossed her arms, a small smirk tugging at the corners of her lips. "Yeah, no need to turn yourself inside out about it. Right?" he said, still blushing in embarrassment. Though the feel of their breasts was just for a moment, it lingered in Izuku's mind, making his cheeks flare an even deeper shade of red. He quickly shook his head, trying to banish the thought. "Focus, Izuku. Now's not the time to get distracted," he scolded himself internally. Though his confidence went up slightly, maybe learning how to be a proper leader would be a good thing for him. After the incident, Izuku and the others were sitting in class after that whole dispute. Mr. Aizawa forgot they needed to nominate a class secretary, which went to Ida while the treasurer went to Jiro. With that settled, Aizawa started to talk about more pressing matters. "Listen up, my students. Today we'll be doing something more interesting for hero training," Aizawa said, pulling out a card from his pocket. He held it up, revealing the words rescue training written in bold letters. The class immediately erupted into excited chatter. "Rescue training?" Uraraka beamed, practically bouncing in her seat. "That sounds amazing. This is going to be awesome," Kirishima said, his eyes sparkling with enthusiasm. "Time to show how manly we are." Aizawa raised a hand, silencing the room with his usual no-nonsense demeanor. "Before you all get too excited, let me explain. This isn't just about showing off your quirks or being flashy. It's about strategy, teamwork, and knowing how to save lives efficiently. We will all be going over to something called the USJ that is close to campus grounds. I know that all of you would like to wear your hero costumes, and I would recommend that you do so, mainly for the reason of in case you would like to make adjustments on them." The students nodded at the advice of their teacher. "Well then, go get changed, and let's get going. We don't have all day. The teachers that will be present is myself and 2 others. Not to mention that it will just be Class 1A for today," he said, standing up and leaving the room with excited students. When the students reassembled outside, Aizawa was already waiting for them, his usual tired expression in place. He looked over to Izuku and gave him a small nod. Izuku blinked, unsure of what the gesture meant until Aizawa spoke. "All right, kid. Round 'em up, Izawa said casually as he boarded the bus, leaving Izuku momentarily frozen. Izuku glanced at the rest of the class. They were chatting animatedly, clearly excited about the rescue training. Taking a deep breath, he stepped forward, raising his voice just enough to be heard. "Everyone, let's get on the bus. Izawa-sensei is waiting, and we don't want to keep him waiting too long," Izuku said, trying to project confidence. The class turned to him, some looking surprised while others smiled in encouragement. "You heard him. Let's move," Ida said, his usual commanding tone lending support to Izuku's words. Uraraka gave Izuku a thumbs up. "Nice call, Yagi." On the bus, Izuku sat next to Tsu and Sato as they were starting to make their way to the USJ. Ida nodded at the setup. "Normally, I would have preferred we be in the order of our seat numbers, but this is fine." Izuku looked around to see everyone was still excited about the training at this USJ place. Then he looked over to Tsu, who stared at him with her big eyes and looked like she was about to say something. "Yagi," she said, her usual calm tone, tilting her head slightly. "I have a couple of questions for you, Ribbit." Izuku blinked, caught off guard. "Sure, Tsu. What's up?" She paused for a moment, her gaze steady. "So, I noticed something. My first question is, isn't your power a lot similar to All Might's? My second question is, why haven't you talked about or talked to your siblings since we've been here? Is there a reason for that?" "You don't have to answer if you don't want to," she said. "Yeah, I've been wondering that too," said Ida. Izuku blinked, Tsu's calm but probing questions catching him completely off guard. His hands fidgeted in his lap as his mind raced for an answer. "Oh," he stammered, his cheeks tinged with pink. "Those are, kind of big questions, Tsu." "I know, Ribbit," she said, tilting her head slightly. "But I've been curious. You don't have to answer if you're not ready." The kindness in her tone eased some of his nerves, though the weight of her questions still lingered. He glanced at Sato, who was listening quietly, giving Izuku a reassuring nod. "Well," Izuku hesitated, deciding to tackle the first question. "About my quirk. Yeah, it does seem a lot like All Might's, doesn't it?" He laughed nervously, rubbing the back of his neck. "I guess it's just a coincidence," he said, hoping to not draw too much attention. "Yeah, your quirk is pretty awesome, Yagi bro. I can call you Yagi bro, right?" asked Kirishima as he continued to talk. "It seems awesome to have a quirk like that, though, because it will help you get noticed in the hero world." "Hardening, my quirk is awesome, but it won't get noticed like yours will," he said, hardening his arm. Izuku, confused at the statement, looked over to Kirishima. "What are you talking about? Yours is the perfect blend of offense and defense. You'll be in the top 30 or even 20 in the future." You think so?" "I can only hope. But aside from Izuku, I think that Todoroki and Bakugo have a clear shot for most powerful and noticeable quirks," said Kirishima, smiling. "Yeah, but Bakugo seems like a person that's pretty rude to other people," she said, making him jump in his seat. "What the hell you say, you damn toad?" he said with his pupils disappearing. Kaminari smirked as he watched this happen. "Dude, the fact that we have been with each other for like 4 days, and we already know that your personality is shit mixed with flaming hot garbage, says something about you already," he said, chuckling. "Shut up, Pikachu," he said as he started to argue. Tsuyu shifted in her seat, signaling she wasn't done. "And about your siblings? I haven't seen you talk to them or mention them since we started school. Ribbit, is there a reason for that?" Izuku froze, his fingers curling into the fabric of his pants. His throat tightened as memories of Ichiro and Inori flooded his mind. He looked at Bakugo, who wasn't glaring at him, but rather just staring. Now that he noticed everyone was looking at him, he cleared his throat to speak. "Well, we have a very complicated relationship, to say the least," he said, trying to get the words out. "Oh, heads up, we are here, the USJ. Make sure that you are ready," said Mr. Izawa, getting up to leave with many others following suit. Izuku thanked whoever it was that looked over him, got up, and made his way out of the bus. He kind of figured that this was going to happen at one point where people would start asking. As Class 1 made their way into the USJ, they marveled at the place. It was a huge dome with what looked like various natural disasters. Everyone was then met with the Pro Hero 13 standing before them. Achiko, who was most excited, started to bounce on the balls of her feet. "Oh my gosh, it's my favorite hero, 13. As the excitement died down, Izuku saw that Mr. Aizawa mentioned All Might being here. 13 held up her fingers, showing the number 3, meaning the time he had during the day to be a hero. Izuku sighed, knowing that when he checked his phone before class, his dad had solved multiple villain incidents, which made it so he couldn't show up for a bit. He was fine with it, though. "All right, Class 1A. Welcome to the USJ," said 13, spreading her arms out. "This facility was designed to prepare you for a variety of rescue scenarios." 13 continued, her calm, authoritative tone commanding everyone's attention. "As aspiring heroes, your duty is to protect and save lives. However, it's important to remember that your quirks, while powerful, can also be dangerous if used recklessly. That's why we're here, to train you in using your abilities responsibly. To demonstrate, look around at the different zones," 13 said, motioning toward the sections that simulated disasters like tornadoes, collapsed buildings, and avalanches. Each of these areas is designed to test your ability to navigate challenges while saving lives. Today's lesson will focus on teamwork, quick thinking, and adaptability. Remember, in a rescue mission, the lives of others come first. We have a fire zone, storm zone, landslide zone, and more. As the chatter died down, 13 raised her hand for silence. "One more thing before we begin," she said. "I want to emphasize that your quirks are tools, not weapons. You've all worked hard to develop your abilities, but remember, the goal here is not to fight. It's to save lives. That means thinking about others before yourself and using your quirks in ways that minimize harm. My quirk Black Hole is the perfect example. It is very destructive, but I use it in ways to rescue people." Aizawa, who had been silently observing, stepped forward. "And don't forget, you'll be graded on more than just how effective your quirks are. Strategy, teamwork, and decision-making are equally important. Keep that in mind as you go." Suddenly, a deep, otherworldly voice echoed through the massive dome. The lights went out, and it seems the heroes in training are eager to begin. The room fell silent as everyone turned toward the central plaza. A dark, swirling mist coalesced into a humanoid shape, revealing the imposing figure of Ichiro Yagi. He was flanked by an army of villains, their menacing presence a stark contrast to the controlled environment of the USJ. At their forefront stood a figure with writhing hands covering his body. Aizawa's eyes narrowed. 13, protect the students, he ordered, his scarf unraveling as he prepared to engage. This isn't part of the exercise. These are real villains. The tension in the air was palpable as the students huddled closer together, many of them realizing the gravity of the situation. Ichiro Yagi's golden eyes glowed ominously as his calm, measured voice filled the air. "Where is All Might? We've come to kill him." Izuku's blood ran cold at the statement, his mind racing. Why do they want to kill Dad? He may not have trusted him or liked him, but he didn't want him die. Izuku looked to Aizawa in worry as he watched him get ready to go to the center plaza. "Wait, Mr. Aizawa, don't you need help? You are only good in surprise attacks and not large groups," said Izuku with worry as 13 was trying to get the students to the entrance. Aizawa glanced over his shoulder, his usual stoic expression briefly softening. "Stay with 13, Yagi. I can handle this." Izuku clenched his fists, doubt gnawing at him. He wanted to argue, but knew that now wasn't the time to challenge Aizawa's authority. He's right. He's a pro, and I'd only get in the way. But the thought of villains targeting his father left a sour pit in his stomach. He shook his head, forcing himself to focus. "This isn't about me or him. It's about protecting everyone here. Come on, Yagi, this way," Ida urged, taking his role as class rep seriously. His arm gestured for everyone to move toward the exit, where 13 stood, ushering them along. "Listen to me," 13 commanded, her voice firm yet calm. "Stay close, don't panic," and the sound of footsteps echoed ominously as Ichiro Yagi's misty form glided forward. The students froze as his golden eyes locked onto them. Leaving so soon? I'm afraid I can't allow that. You see, We came here with a purpose, and letting you run away would be most inconvenient. Izuku was charging up full cowling to his 50% limit and was prepared to use a wind pressure-based attack to stop him, but hesitated from the sound of 13's voice. "Get back," 13 shouted, stepping between the students and Kirojiri. She raised her hands, her fingers glowing faintly as her quirk prepared to activate. "Stay behind me. I'll handle this." Kirojiri tilted his head, his voice eerily calm. A noble sentiment, but futile. His dark mist expanded rapidly, swirling toward the group. "Move now," Ida yelled, pushing the others toward the entrance. Bakugo, however, had other ideas. "Like hell I'm running," he snarled, sparks crackling from his palms. Without hesitation, he launched himself forward, explosions propelling him straight at Kirojiri. "Bakugo, stop!" Izuku shouted as he tried to find an angle of attack. Kirishima, ever loyal, wasn't far behind. "If you're charging in, so am I," he called, his body hardening as he leapt into the fray. With a simple motion, he expanded his quirk further, engulfing Bakugo and Kirishima in swirling darkness. Before they could react, they vanished, their shouts of surprise fading into the void. It started to spread to his other classmates, and Izuku thought of something. "You used Zephyr Rush to push back this black mist." The wind whirled around him as he pushed back his quirk. Kirojiri took notice of this, and his eyes narrowed. "Well, looks like we have a fighter. But, in the end, it means nothing in the face of my power," he said as his mist engulfed many of the students. His thoughts flickered to his classmates. Where are they? He had to get to them. There was no time to waste. But Kirojiri wasn't going to give him that chance. The villain's dark form moved toward him, his mist swirling like a storm. "You think you can stop me with a little wind, boy?" Kirojiri's golden eyes gleamed as he raised his hand. "You will learn soon enough that you are no match for me." The mist began to intensify around Izuku, pulling him in. He felt his body resist the pull, but the force was overwhelming. He gritted his teeth, trying to stabilize himself with Zephyr Rush, but the pressure was too great. He couldn't fire off a smash from One for All without risking the lives of his friends, and it annoyed him to no end. He felt himself sinking into the mist as Kirojiri taunted him. "Told you I was stronger," he said as Izuku fell in completely. Suddenly, he looked to see he was falling towards a huge body of water and a ship. He activated Eagle Eyes as he looked around. From what he could tell, this was the flood zone, and he saw two other people falling. He saw a pair of gloves and shoes meaning that were Toru, and he looked over to see Momo falling too. Izuku reacted quickly and used Black Whip to secure Toru and Momo, pulling them towards him. Izuku used another strand of Black Whip to pull themselves to the boat in the middle of the flood zone of the USJ, landing on the wood floor of the boat. He looked to his two classmates to see what the damage was. "Are you both okay?" he asked, making sure they were good to go. Toru nodded, though her voice was shaky. "I think so." Her gloves twitched slightly as she spoke, a clear sign of her unease. Momo coughed lightly and pushed wet strands of hair from her face. "I'm all right." Izuku nodded. "That good, but Hagakure, a bit off topic, but are you naked? Because I didn't feel any clothes, and I don't mean it like that," he said, blushing horribly. Toru let out a squeak of embarrassment, pulling her gloves up higher, as if that could somehow compensate. "Why, invisibility and clothes don't work well together, but yeah, I am," she said. "I'm so sorry. I would have been more careful," he said, bowing to her. Toru quickly waved her hands, her voice rising in a panicked stammer. "And no, it's okay, really. I mean, it's not your fault. This situation is just awkward, but let's not dwell on it." Her attempt at diffusing the situation only made Izuku blush harder. "All right, of course. We have bigger things to worry about, like escaping and finding the others." He rubbed the back of his head, clearly flustered. Momo smirked at Izuku's antics, but looked to see something in the water. She looked over the railings to see an assortment of villains coming towards the boat. "Guys, look," she called out to them. "Great. So, we know that guy teleported all of us around the places in the USJ full of villains, but they don't know our quirks," said Izuku, looking at them. "How do you know that?" asked Toru. Because of this, he said, showing them Jolt, with electricity flowing throughout his body. They wouldn't have sent me here with all of this water then, he said, counting the villains. Izuku focused on the group of villains advancing toward their boat, his mind racing. There were 6 in total, each with an intimidating presence, but their movements seemed cautious and uncertain. It was clear they didn't know the full extent of his or his classmates' abilities. They don't have intel on us, Izuku repeated, glancing over at Momo and Toru. If they did, they wouldn't send us here with water everywhere while I have access to electricity through my quirk. Momo furrowed her brows, quickly analyzing the situation. That makes sense. They're trying to overwhelm us with numbers rather than strategy. Toru tugged nervously at the blanket around her shoulders. Okay, so they don't know our quirks, but what's the plan? We can't take them all head on. The plan is this, said Izuku as he pushed them to the center of the wooden floor. I will use my electricity to shock the water and take it out. Just be sure to not touch metal, he said as he walked to the edge of the railing. Izuku reached the edge of the boat, his green lightning crackling fiercely as he prepared to use his quirk. He could feel the weight of responsibility pressing on him. One wrong move could put his classmates in danger. He glanced back at Momo and Toru, both standing in the center of the boat away from the metal railings. Are you sure this will work? Momo asked, her voice steady but laced with concern. It'll work, Izuku said, determination burning in his eyes. I'll send a controlled stream into the water to neutralize the villains. It won't be enough to kill them, but should knock them out or at least keep them from getting any closer. Izuku stood firm at the edge of the boat, green lightning sparking around his body as he readied Jolt. He glanced at the villains approaching, their figures cutting through the water with sinister intent. He took a deep breath, focusing on his focus. Izuku looked to see Momo had created an insulated blanket to wrap around the two of them and smiled. It was pretty smart for the moment and was glad. There you go, Izuku, said Momo. You don't have to hold back now, she said, poking her head out. Thanks, Momo, Izuku said, his voice steady despite the tension. This will make things a lot easier. One of the villains, a large man with shark-like features, grinned viciously as he climbed onto a piece of debris floating nearby. You think your little tricks can stop us? You're out of your league, kid. Izuku didn't reply. Instead, he raised his hand, the lightning around his body intensifying as he focused Jolt into his palm. The water beneath the villains began to ripple as the energy spread outward, and Izuku's eyes narrowed. I won't let you hurt anyone, Izuku said firmly. He thrust his hand forward, releasing a controlled surge of electricity into the water. The effect was immediate. The green lightning arced across the surface, illuminating the dark waters and striking the villains in an instant. They screamed as the current coursed through their bodies, their movements becoming erratic before they collapsed into the water, unconscious. The boat rocked slightly from the force of the attack, but Momo's quick thinking had ensured they were safe. You did it, Yagi, Toru called out, peeking out from the blanket with a mixture of awe and relief. Momo nodded, her sharp eyes scanning the water. Yes, but we should secure them. If any of them recover, they'll come after us again. Izuku pulled the unconscious villains out of the water, his black whip tendrils coiling around their bodies with ease. The villains hung limply in the air as he dragged them onto the boat, one by one. Each villain was a different size and shape, but none of them stirred after the shock had taken them down. Momo, working quickly, conjured ropes from her quirk and began tying them securely, making sure each one was immobilized. Toru stepped out from behind the blanket, looking over the tied-up villains with cautious curiosity. That was really impressive, Yagi, she said, her voice still shaky but filled with admiration. I've never seen you use your quirk like that before. Thanks, I have a very versatile quirk, he said, rubbing the back of his head. Momo tied the last villain as she wiped her hands off from the effort. Well, now that is done, how do we get out of here? She said, looking at the two of them. I got it, said Izuku as he activated full cowling to 50%. What does that do? Asked Momo, not sure she had seen this. Just trust me, Izuku said again, offering his hands to the two girls. His eyes were steady, but his heart was racing. Full cowling wasn't something he used lightly. It took a toll on his body, but right now, they needed speed and precision, and he could provide that. Momo hesitated for only a moment before stepping forward, her eyes searching his face for any hint of doubt. I trust you, Izuku. Let's do this. Toru, looking a bit more uncertain but still trusting in Izuku, nodded and stepped toward him. You got this, right? I'm not exactly fond of rushing through unknown territory. Don't worry, I've got a good hold on it, Izuku said, his voice calm and confident, though a bead of sweat trickled down his forehead from the exertion of activating full cowling. Hold on tight, okay? He used 2 strands of black whip to secure the 2 somewhat nervous girls around them to make them secure. Izuku's hands glowed faintly with energy as the strands of black whip wrapped around Momo and Toru, securing them gently yet firmly. The familiar hum of full cowling surged through him, amplifying every sensation as the power coursed through his body. His muscles were tense with the strain, but he was focused. His goal was clear. They needed to get to safety, and quickly. Okay, Izuku said, his voice steady despite the underlying tension. We're good to go. Just hold on tight. With the 2 girls clutching onto him, Izuku leapt into the air to the next location. He had hoped that the rest of his classmates were fine on their own. This is who is in what zones. Landslide Zone Jiro and Ojiro. Fire Zone Ida. Ruins Zone Kaminari and Mina. Mountain Zone Kago, Sato, and Tokoyami. Windstorm Zone Shoji and Siro. 13. Todoroki, Azui, Mineta, Uraraka, Yanagi, and Kirishima stared at the towering form of Kirojiri as they tried to come up with a plan. Listen to me, said 13 as she got everyone's attention. Who is the fastest one here? She asked as she prepared her quirk to be used against him. Todoroki looked at her. I'm fast enough, but we'll need more than just speed to defeat him. He could just teleport through my ice crystals no matter how thick they are. Same goes for my flames, he said. Then be prepared to leave. I will make an opening. You will need to tell the teachers what is happening to send back. Remember, being a hero means knowing when to trust others to hold the line, she said, shocking him. But I can't just leave you all, he said, looking at everyone. You know you shouldn't tell your plan out in the open, said Kirojiri as he charged at him. 13 popped open. Black hole, she yelled out as he started to be pulled into her quirk. Shoto hesitated, not sure if he should leave them behind or fight this guy. Shoto's hesitation lasted only a heartbeat, but it felt like an eternity. 13's black hole continued to swirl, its gravitational pull dragging at Kirojiri's mist-like form. For a moment, it seemed like their teacher's strategy might work, but Kirojiri's low, resonant laughter shattered that hope. An admirable effort, Kirojiri said, his voice calm yet menacing. But predictable. The villain's mist stretched and twisted unnaturally, reaching behind 13. In a horrifying display, Kirojiri redirected the pull of her quirk back toward her. The rescue hero stumbled, her suit straining against the intense gravitational force. 13. Mineta screamed, his hands trembling as she prepared to launch a volley of sticky balls. Stay back. 13 managed to yell, her voice strained but commanding. Focus on the plan. Shoto's mind raced as he took in the scene. He wanted to stay and fight, but 13's earlier words echoed in his head. Being a hero means knowing when to trust others to hold the line. The path was clear, even if it went against his instincts. Everyone, hold him off, Shoto shouted, his voice cutting through the chaos. I'll get reinforcements. Don't let him follow me. Go! Uraraka yelled back, her fists clenched tightly. She glanced at Azui, who nodded, her tongue already snapping out to pull Mineta to safety. We'll keep him busy. Kirojiri's form shifted again, his attention snapping to Shoto. You think you can escape? Foolish. Before the villain could intercept, Kirishima charged forward, his hardened body slamming into the ground between Kirojiri and Shoto. Not so fast, Kirishima growled, his jagged arms raised defensively. You're not going anywhere near him. Kirojiri's mist swirled ominously, his form reforming with chilling precision. "You are brave," he said, addressing Kirishima with a cold, almost mocking tone. "But bravery without strategy is meaningless." Kirishima gritted his teeth, his rock-like armor gleaming under the dim light of the facility. "We'll see about that," he growled, taking a defensive stance. Behind him, Shoto used the opening to dash toward the exit, his boots crunching against the debris-strewn ground. "Keep him busy," Shoto shouted over his shoulder, his voice firm but tinged with urgency. His classmates, standing together as a makeshift shield, gave him the confidence to press forward. Kirojiri turned his attention to the remaining students, his mist-like form swirling menacingly. "You truly believe you can hold me off?" he asked, his voice an unsettling mix of calm and menace. "Do not underestimate us," Yanagi added, her quirk activating as she levitated several chunks of rubble, hurling them at Kirojiri. Kirojiri shifted his form again, dodging the attacks with unnerving fluidity. "Futile," he murmured, but his movements slowed just enough to buy Shoto more time. Shoto sprinted through the ruined facility, his breaths coming in quick, shallow bursts. The cold air around him crystallized with each exhale as he used his eyes to create a smooth path, allowing him to slide faster toward the exit. His mind was a storm of emotions: worry for his classmates, frustration at leaving them behind, and determination to succeed. "I need to use my ice to break the door open. It is likely super strong, but I need to do it. 13 is injured and my friends need me. I can only use my flames in unison with my eyes for so long, but I need to push through," he thought as he made it closer to the door. Shoto skidded to a halt in front of the massive double doors of the USJ facility. His chest heaved as he took a deep breath, frost curling from his lips as the adrenaline coursing through his veins mixed with his icy power. The door loomed before him, its reinforced steel standing as the final obstacle between him and the reinforcements his friends so desperately needed. He placed a hand against the frigid surface, his breath catching in his throat. "It's reinforced, probably to withstand even high-level quirks. But I can't let that stop me." Frost began to spread from his palm, delicate crystalline patterns racing across the surface. Shoto clenched his teeth, focusing his power, but the reinforced material resisted his efforts. He knew ice alone wouldn't be enough. His left side flared to life as flames erupted from his arm, bathing the door in intense heat. The sudden shift in temperature caused the steel to groan and crack, steam hissing into the air. Shoto winced as the opposing forces clashed within him. Behind him, Kirojiri's ominous form began to materialize, his mist swirling with deadly intent. The villain's voice cut through the air like a blade. "You're too late," he said, his tone calm and mocking. Shoto turned his head, his heart skipping a beat as he saw the dark mist coalescing into Kirojiri's shape. "No, not now." But before Kirojiri could make his move, he froze, literally. His mist-like form began to rise into the air, his movements suddenly jerky and uncoordinated. "What?" Kirojiri's voice faltered, his composure cracking for the first time. From behind him, Uraraka stepped forward, her fingers glowing as she activated her zero-gravity quirk. "You're not getting anywhere near him," she shouted, her voice filled with resolve. "You damn brat," he said, floating into the air. But it wasn't done there. He felt something wrapped around his metal plate, and it was Tsu's tongue. "Nope, not today, villain," she said as she started to swing him around. She threw him far enough that he wouldn't be able to teleport close to Shoto, giving him some time. Shoto pushed through his limits, and the door blasted open from the intense heat and cold, allowing him to escape through a somewhat small hole. He used his left side to create an ice path while using his flames to propel himself forward, making his way to UA. "Shit," was all Kirojiri said as he watched a child run to UA to get help. Now, there was only so much time. With Izuku, Momo, and Toru, Izuku landed near the central plaza at the edge of the water, making sure not to hurt the two girls he had at their side. He deactivated full cowling and black whip and looked at the two of them. Izuku landed softly near the central plaza, his feet grazing the edge of the water as he carefully ensured that Momo and Toru were unharmed. He dropped them gently to the ground, his movements as controlled as possible, all while staying aware of his surroundings. The last thing he wanted was for them to be caught off guard by the chaos surrounding them. He deactivated full cowling, letting the hum of his power fade, and Black Whip dissipated into the air, returning to the depths of his consciousness. "All right, we're here," Izuku said, exhaling deeply as he stood up straighter. His body ached from the exertion of carrying them both, but his focus was unwavering. The mission wasn't over yet, and there was still plenty to do. "You both okay?" Momo nodded, brushing a strand of hair from her face as she adjusted her gear. Her expression was serious, but Izuku could tell she wasn't shaken. "We're fine, Izuku. We're just glad to be here, but we have no time to waste. We need to get to the entrance." Izuku heard fighting, and he went and looked over the edge. He saw that his teacher was fighting the villains off. "But what about Mr. Aizawa? Doesn't he need help?" he asked, concerned for him. "He will have to be fine on his own. We aren't even heroes yet. We would only get in the way," said Momo. Izuku clenched his fists, his breath coming in sharp bursts as the frustration began to boil within him. He hated feeling helpless, especially when it came to his friends and mentors. But he's out there alone. We can't just leave him to fight them by himself. Toru, hovering nearby, her invisible form flickering in the air, spoke up with a tone that was equal parts serious and optimistic. "We're not going to leave him. Not to mention, he is a hero for a reason. Let's just wait it out and see what happens," she said. Momo, sensing the turmoil in his expression, placed a hand on his shoulder, grounding him. "Izuku," she said gently but firmly, "I know you want to help him, but we can't risk it. If we go rushing in without a plan, we'll only make things worse. Mr. Aizawa knows what he's doing. We'll wait for the right moment." "But," he said, still feeling helpless not to assist him. He clenched his fists as Momo kept her hand on his shoulder. He kept watching his teacher using his scarf to deal with the villains. He admired him slightly, as Aizawa didn't have anything physical about him. He didn't say he wasn't strong, but Aizawa's quirk made it so that the person he faced off against would be on his level. He didn't have a physically enhancing quirk, so he was just a normal guy fighting against them in the best way he could. He was stirred from his thoughts as he saw the man with hands charge in at Aizawa, making him nervous, but Momo's hand tightened on him to make sure he didn't do anything dumb. Izuku's attention snapped back to the battle as he saw Aizawa using his scarf to restrain one of the villains. It was impressive, seeing the seasoned pro fight so fiercely, relying on nothing more than his ingenuity and his quirk. Aizawa didn't have the luxury of a physically enhanced ability like most heroes. His strength wasn't in raw power, but in his ability to erase the quirks of his opponents, bringing them down to his level. Even without extra abilities, Aizawa fought as though he were on the same level as those around him, using his mind and skill to level the playing field. Izuku admired that. He thought that Aizawa's resilience and adaptability were something to aspire to. But right now, seeing his teacher locked in a desperate fight, Izuku couldn't help but feel like he should be out there, helping. Suddenly, Izuku's heart skipped a beat as he saw one of the villains moving towards Aizawa. His eyes narrowed, watching with a tense focus. He had hands all over his body and was able to move at high speed. Shigaraki lunged at him, with Aizawa ready to hit him with an elbow. Aizawa hit a well-placed elbow, but was caught by Shigaraki, who smirked. "It took me a while to notice, but your quirk is activated when your hair stands up. Not to mention your quirk is being activated for less and less time," he said as his clothing started to crumble apart. Aizawa's eyes widened as he felt his elbow start to fall apart. He punched the villain in the face, backing away from him as he looked at his elbow. "Shit, I can't move it," he said as he kicked another villain away from him as he tried to regroup himself. Izuku stared at his teacher as he was now hurt. He subconsciously activated full cowling to 50%, making Momo nervous. "Izuku, please," she said as he started to stand up. "I can't stand by as our teacher is hurt," he said, looking at her. He then heard the villain say one word. "Nomu." In an instant, Nomu was behind Aizawa, and Izuku's eyes widened. "Sorry, Momo," he said as he rose up. Izuku pushed himself off the ground with blinding speed, the world around him blurring as he activated Jolt alongside 50% of One for All. His muscles burned with the intensity of the energy, but the focus kept him moving. He shot forward, faster than he had ever moved before, barely registering the rush of wind against his face as he closed the distance between himself and Nomu in seconds. He reached out with lightning speed, grabbing his teacher by his good arm and yanking him out of harm's way just as Nomu's fist crashed into the spot where Aizawa had been standing. The force of the punch sent a shockwave through the air, but Izuku was already sliding backward with his teacher in tow, pulling them both out of the immediate danger zone. He moved with instinct, barely registering the weight of Aizawa in his grip, his heart pounding as the tension of the moment made his muscles burn even more. Izuku didn't waste a second. As soon as he was clear of the Nomu's range, he turned to Aizawa, his breath coming in sharp gasps. "Are you okay?" he asked, his voice tight with concern. The moment of relief was brief, his body still glowing with energy as he held Aizawa steady. Aizawa, for the most part, was shocked at how fast he was to be able to move him out of the way of the monstrous figure. "What are you doing, kid?" he asked, half glad and half upset at the recklessness of his student. "Getting you out of the way," said Izuku, surprised he was able to move that quick himself. He looked out the corner of his eye to see that Momo and Toru were out of the water and still back a good distance away from them, but enough to be visible. Izuku's heart was still racing, his adrenaline pumping in overdrive. He glanced back at Aizawa, still holding him steady, making sure his teacher was stable for a moment. The hero looked up at him, his expression a mixture of disbelief and annoyance. "You have no idea what you're doing, do you, kid?" Aizawa's voice was stern, but there was a hint of gratitude underneath it. "Beings, I just saved you then, yes, I do," he said, slightly annoyed himself. Shigaraki was now intrigued by the kid in front of him. He was annoyed that Eraserhead didn't get crushed, and the kid somehow was about to blitz his way to get to him. He started to scratch his neck as he looked at Izuku. Shigaraki's eyes narrowed as he observed Izuku, a twisted smile creeping across his face. Well, he muttered, his voice laced with dark amusement. "It looks like we've got a little speedster on our hands. But you're too reckless, kid." He tilted his head slightly, as if studying Izuku like a puzzle he couldn't quite figure out. A black mist appeared right next to Shigaraki, and Izuku knew this wasn't going to be fun. "Shigaraki, one of the students has escaped," he said, making Shigaraki's hands twitch. "Hirojiri," he said, starting to scratch his neck rapidly. "How the hell are you supposed to help if you just messed up our plan?" he said, causing himself to bleed when he just stopped and started to smile at Izuku. "No matter. I need to let out my frustration," he said as he looked at Nomu, who waited there emotionlessly. Aizawa looked at his student and grabbed him with his good arm. Aizawa's grip on Izuku's arm was firm, despite the obvious pain from his injuries. He looked at his student with a sharp gaze, his expression a mix of frustration and something else, perhaps reluctant approval. "Izuku," he said, his voice low and urgent, "you need to get out of here." "Can't do that, sir. You are too injured to fight this thing," he said, looking at him with concern. Before Aizawa could talk back, Shigaraki got the two's attention. "Do you two know what this thing is?" Shigaraki gestured toward Nomu with a flick of his hand, his smile twisted and full of malice. "This thing isn't just some mindless beast. It's the culmination of our work. The perfect weapon created to destroy All Might." Izuku's eyes widened as he stared at the creature. So this was the plan to take out his father. "Now, why don't we go for a test drive before All Might get here?" "Nomu, take out the kid," he said calmly. Izuku's danger sense activated, and in the blink of an eye, Izuku activated full cowling along with Jolt once more as he saw the big creature coming at him. He looked over to his teacher, who hadn't moved. He realized that he was seeing everything in slow motion from his high speed. "Sorry, Aizawa-sensei." Izuku gritted through his teeth as he shoved his teacher to safety, sending him flying toward Momo and Toru, who were watching from a distance. Aizawa's eyes widened in shock, but he didn't resist, trusting his student's instincts. As soon as he saw that Aizawa was out of the immediate danger zone, Izuku turned back to face Nomu. With 50% of one for all coursing through him, Izuku crouched and then launched himself toward the Nomu. The creature swung its massive fist toward him. His fist collided with Nomu's fist with a thunderous impact. The force of the punch sent a shockwave reverberating through the plaza, rattling windows and shaking the very ground beneath them. Izuku's knuckles stung from the force. He looked at the creature, realizing that he didn't do a thing to it. Even with 50% full cowling, Nomu received minimal damage. Izuku felt something tear in his arm from the punch, realizing this thing was the real deal. Shigaraki laughed as he stood beside Kirojiri. "So, our little speedster is also strong, huh?" "No matter. Like I said, Hero, this thing was built to destroy All Might. One of his powers is shock absorption. Plus, he has super regeneration. You can't beat him," he said as he stood there giddy with excitement. Izuku gritted his teeth, his mind racing. Shock absorption. It was a terrifying realization. Nomu wasn't just any monster. It was a supercharged weapon designed to resist the very force that would normally shatter any other being. Even his full cowling with 50% of one for all wasn't enough to deal significant damage. The odds were stacking higher by the second. If this thing can handle my dad at 100% of his power, then I need to beat him with more than 100% of mine. But I'll hurt myself going past my limit of 50%. But there's also the fact that one for all becomes stronger with each user, and I'm technically the 10th user of this quirk in a way. No matter, I need to win. No matter what happens to me, I need to use everything that I have in my arsenal, he thought as he stared the beast down. His mind quickly assessed his options. Joel had already given him speed, but he was still just slightly slower than Nomu. I need more speed, and I need to be able to react faster. He knew the answer. Eagle Eyes. The quirk would allow him to perceive movement at an even slower rate, giving him the edge he needed to outmaneuver the Nomu. But speed alone wasn't enough. Nomu's shock absorption meant that any hit he landed would likely do minimal damage. Izuku needed to strike with power. He clenched his fists, feeling the electricity coursing through his veins. I need more output for both One for All and Jolt. His mind snapped to evacuation, the quirk that allowed him to build up kinetic energy and release it in devastating bursts. With this, he could unleash powerful blows that could potentially damage Nomu's tough exterior. His muscles screamed in protest as he forced himself to stand his ground, holding Nomu's fist at bay. His body felt like it was being pushed to its breaking point, but he didn't care. He wasn't going to let this monster kill his father or anyone else. He had to win. No matter what happens to me, I need to use everything that I have. You can play You Say Run here if you want. Shigaraki scoffed. You're a strong young hero in training. I'll give you that, but that is enough. Nomu, eliminate him, he said. The command was cold, devoid of mercy, and Nomu's eyes, void of emotion, locked onto Izuku as it began to retract its fist, preparing for the next move. Izuku closed his eyes as he started to activate his quirks. He pushes One for All to 75% and Jolt to its limit, making his body scream in pain, but the adrenaline helped with counteracting that. He activated Eagle Eyes to ensure he would be able to see Nomu's attacks easier, and he prepared to use evacuation. Nomu cocked his massive fist back as Izuku mirrored the action, his own hand trembling slightly under the strain of his growing injuries. Their fists collided once more with a deafening boom, the force of their blows reverberating through the battlefield. The impact was far greater than before, a shockwave rippling outward that sent nearby students and debris flying. Those within close proximity could barely hold their ground, their forms buckling against the sheer pressure of the clash. Shigaraki, growing visibly frustrated as the confrontation dragged on, barked at his monstrous creation. "Again," he commanded, his voice sharp and laced with desperation. Obediently, Nomu reared back once more, the grotesque bulge of its arm muscles contorting unnaturally as it prepared to unleash another earth-shattering punch. Across from it, Izuku stood defiant, though his battered body protested with every movement. His breaths came in sharp, ragged bursts, and his legs trembled under the weight of his injuries. Pain coursed through him like wildfire, threatening to bring him to his knees, but he gritted his teeth and forced himself upright. He couldn't falter now. He wouldn't. Their fists collided again, and again, and again. The pace of their strikes quickened until it became impossible to follow with the naked eye. Each successive blow produced a shockwave stronger than the last, forcing those nearby to struggle just to stay grounded. Mr. Aizawa, his eyes darting between the ferocious battle and his vulnerable students, wrapped his scarf tightly around Momo and Toru, anchoring them in place against the relentless wind pressure. The air around them seemed to ripple with energy, vibrating with each thunderous hit. "Damn it, Kirojiri! Get to them!" Shigaraki snarled, his composure cracking. The dark mist of Kirojiri's portal flickered uncertainly as he replied, "I can't, Shigaraki. The energy is too unstable. I can't get close enough without being torn apart." Aizawa, his usually stoic expression now strained, found himself in a similar predicament. His own limitations gnawed at him as he grappled with the situation. "Aizawa-sensei, you have to help Izuku," Momo shouted, her voice barely audible over the roaring winds. She clung to the ground, her wide eyes filled with worry. "I can't, Yairozu," Aizawa admitted through gritted teeth. His frustration was palpable. "This is a whole different playing field. My goggles broke a while ago, and I can't keep my eyes open long enough to erase its quirks. The wind pressure is too intense." His voice softened slightly as he added, almost to himself, "I have to trust him. I have to trust that he can handle this." On the battlefield, Izuku pushed himself to his limits and beyond. His strikes grew fiercer, faster, as he drew upon every ounce of strength within him. Shigaraki, shielding his face from the flying debris, watched in disbelief as the boy's punches seemed to match, then surpass, the Nomu's. "You can't win," Shigaraki shouted, his voice tinged with both anger and panic. "Nomu was made to destroy All Might. Do you hear me? All Might." Izuku's response was a defiant roar. "Then it's a good thing I'm not him." His costume, already battered from earlier encounters, began to crumble away under the strain of his movements. Strips of fabric peeled from his arms and chest, revealing crimson skin marred with swelling and bruises. His muscles burned as though they were on fire, but Izuku didn't stop. He couldn't stop. The pain no longer registered, his nerves likely too damaged to send the signals. His arms glowed a furious red, a testament to the toll his relentless assault was taking on his body. To the untrained eye, it seemed as though Izuku and Nomu were evenly matched. But for those who could perceive the details, something extraordinary was happening. For every punch Nomu threw, Izuku was responding 1.5 times faster, each of his blows packed with explosive force. He was moving so quickly and efficiently that he was landing hit after hit before Nomu could fully recover. "You said his quirk is shock absorption, not nullification," Izuku shouted over the chaos, his voice filled with defiance. "That means he can only handle so much. He has a limit." His fists blurred as they struck Nomu with relentless precision. Izuku's mind raced, his enhanced cognitive functions calculating at lightning speed. "If my estimates are right, with F.A. Gene, Jolt, and One for All at 75%, I am hitting him with about the same amount as Dad would if he used 100%, maybe a bit more with how this thing is reacting. I haven't much time to increase the power of One for All, so I need to use more of it." The thought ignited something within him, pushing him even harder. "It's not enough. I need to increase my output more." Grimacing, Izuku made the split-second decision to push his One for All output to 80%. His body screamed in protest, muscles tearing and bones creaking under the strain, but he forced himself through it. His energy output surged, creating shockwaves so intense that even Shigaraki had to brace himself. What is happening?" Shigaraki yelled, his voice tinged with panic as he saw the unthinkable unfold. The Nomu, Shigaraki's ultimate weapon, was faltering. Each punch sent the creature stumbling back, its grotesque form struggling to withstand the sheer power it was being bombarded with. "You're nothing more than a child." Shigaraki spat, though his confidence wavered. "You can't defeat Nomu." "Watch me," he yelled as he continued to lay out blows on the Nomu. Nomu was no longer landing blows as he once did, but rather was just being hit repeatedly. Nomu roared in fury, its body convulsing as it tried to retaliate, but it was too slow now. Izuku was no longer fighting defensively. He was outright dominating the fight. Nomu's counterattacks became sluggish, its once invincible form now struggling to withstand the onslaught. The villain's body shuddered, its reinforced muscles reaching their limit. The shock absorption could only take so much punishment before it failed. Izuku grabbed Nomu's leg and with one mighty heave, flung him high into the air. The monster soared, arms flailing wildly. Izuku bent his knees, then launched himself skyward in pursuit, his green lightning crackling violently around him. Nomu barely had time to react before Izuku's foot slammed into its chest, sending it rocketing downward. Boom! Nomu hit the ground with such force that the earth cracked beneath him, debris flying in all directions. Izuku landed softly, green lightning reverberating around his body as he smiled. "You know, I've been here for only a few days, but Yue has already taught me one thing," he said, clenching his fist as energy began to surge within him. With 80% of one for all and Fa Jin's reserves maxed out, Izuku cocked his fist back, the very air shaking from the sheer force building in his arm. Nomu stirred, its body twitching, but Izuku was already moving. That is to go beyond. He blasted forward, breaking through the sound barrier as his fist pulled back, a hammer ready to drop. Shigaraki took a step back. No, this isn't happening. The moment Izuku's fist connected, the entire battlefield shook. Plus, Ultra. The Nomu rocketed through the air, a blur of dark flesh and twisted limbs. It impacted the walls of the USJ, shattering the reinforced concrete as if it were made of glass. The force of the blow was so immense that the beast punched straight through, its body sent careening into the open sky beyond. Crack! Boom! A trail of destruction followed its path, shockwaves rippling outward as the Nomu spun uncontrollably, smashing through a distant watchtower before disappearing into the forest beyond the training grounds. For a long moment, silence hung over the battlefield. Izuku exhaled sharply, his body trembling from the sheer overload of power he had just unleashed. His muscles screamed, his vision blurred, and his breath came in ragged gasps. But he remained standing. He had won. Shigaraki stood frozen, his red eyes wide with disbelief. His most powerful pawn, the bioengineered monster designed to kill All Might, had been overpowered. By a student, by a child, by a brat. And no, Shigaraki took an unsteady step back, his fingers twitching. That's impossible. That's not how this was supposed to go. Izuku slowly turned his gaze toward him, green lightning still crackling around his battered form. He could barely stand, but his eyes burned with defiance. "Looks like I just rewrote your script." Kirojiri's smoky form wavered. "Shigaraki, we need to go." Shigaraki's teeth gritted together in frustration. He wanted to deny it, to refuse to accept what had just happened. But he knew. Nomu was gone. The plan had failed. Izuku took a step forward, wobbling slightly but refusing to fall. He felt a hand on his shoulder and saw Aizawa was standing next to him. "Good job, kid," he said as he got in front of. Izuku, in a defensive stance, prepared to fight if need be. "You son of a bitch. You killed Nomu." Nomu was supposed to kill All Might, but he was beaten by a brat. Impossible. That means Nomu was weak. There is no other way, he said, scratching his neck as he started to back up towards Kirojiri. Shigaraki's hands twitched, nails digging into his own flesh as he stepped back. His breathing was ragged, uneven, a mix of rage and disbelief twisting his face into something monstrous. No, this wasn't supposed to happen. You're nothing. A worthless brat. That thing was made to kill All Might, and you— He pointed a trembling finger at Izuku, his voice rising to a fever pitch. "You shouldn't have been able to win." Izuku straightened his posture, swallowing the pain that screamed through his body. His muscles ached from the strain of channeling so much power, but he stood firm, green lightning still crackling weakly around him. "Maybe you should stop underestimating people," he said, his voice low but steady. "I may not be all might, but I'm not weak." Shigaraki's expression twisted into something ugly, his hands jerking toward Izuku, as if to decay him where he stood. But Aizawa was already moving, stepping fully in front of his student, his scarf unraveling slightly in preparation for another fight. "Back down, villain," Aizawa warned, his eyes glowing red as he activated Erasure. "You lost." For a second, it seemed like Shigaraki might lunge anyway, madness and frustration boiling over. But before he could, Kurogiri's misty form solidified behind him. "Shigaraki." Kurogiri's voice was calm but urgent. "We must retreat." Shigaraki clenched his teeth so hard that it seemed like they might crack. His nails dug deeper into his neck, leaving red, angry marks. Damn it all. Just know this, heroes are the scum of society. Heroes are no different than villains. Both cause destruction and pain. One just gets praised for it. Shigaraki's voice was filled with raw frustration, his fingers twitching as he scratched violently at his neck. His breath came out ragged, his red eyes burning with barely contained rage. Izuku, despite his exhaustion, narrowed his eyes. His body ached, his muscles screamed for rest, but he refused to let Shigaraki's words go unanswered. He straightened his back as much as his battered body would allow. "That's not true," he said, his voice hoarse but firm. "Heroes don't just destroy, they protect. They save lives. That's the difference." Shigaraki let out a bitter laugh, a twisted smirk curling on his lips. "Protect? Save lives?" He spat on the ground. "Tell that to the people who've lost everything in the crossfire. Tell that to the families ruined because a so-called hero couldn't save them in time. Tell that to me." His voice cracked at the end, an unhinged mix of anger and something far more painful. "This isn't over," Shigaraki growled, his red eyes boring into Izuku's exhausted form. "You hear me, brat? I'll remember this. Next time, you won't be so lucky." "What do you mean next time?" said the towering figure of All Might as he appeared from behind Izuku. Shigaraki growled. "Fuck you, you bastard," he said as step back into the portal disappeared as they teleported out of there. For a moment, everything was still. The battlefield was eerily quiet, the only sound the distant groaning of the damaged USJ structure. Then, the tension broke. "Izuku!" yelled Momo as she ran over to him alongside Toru. He was about to fall backward, but All Might was there to catch him. He looked at his battered and bruised son and couldn't help but feel guilty. He passed out from the pain, and he wasn't surprised why. His arms both were reddish pink, and in some area purple from overexertion. He had so much energy coursing through him that it ripped his costume to the part remaining on him was his lower half. Cuts, bruises, and gashes were riddled all over his body, yet that was what could be seen. Momo leaned down and didn't know what to do now. He needs medical attention now," All Might said as he looked at him. "Recovery girl is on her way," he said, preparing to pick him up. "Get to the entrance. I'll tie up some of the villains. I'll tell you what happened in a bit," Aizawa said, wrapping his arm in bandages. All Might nodded as he rushed to the door at blinding speeds holding his son. Many of his classmates gasped at how their president was reduced to almost nothing. "God damn it. I failed him once again. I failed to be there to protect him, and he had to step up. What the hell kind of father am I?" He had to wait a minute, but the reinforcements that Todoroki grabbed came running in to deal with the rest of the villains and help the students. All Might ran to Recovery Girl, holding Izuku in front of her. "Please, Recovery Girl. He needs it the most," he said, placing him down on the stretcher next to her. Recovery Girl's eyes softened with a touch of concern as she examined the battered form of Izuku. His body was a map of destruction. Bruises, cuts, and lacerations crisscrossed his skin, his costume barely clinging to him. All Might, his face drawn with guilt, stood beside her, his hands clenched into fists at his sides. She nodded sharply, her eyes flicking over to All Might. "He needs emergency surgery now," she said, kissing him on the chest. It was enough to heal the cuts and gashes on him. That should be enough to help, but we need to get him back now, she said as robots placed him in an ambulance. She verified to see if anyone else needed help, which none needed it other than Aizawa. But he said to help him first. Go back and help. You can see him later, she said as she stepped into her ambulance. All Might stood frozen for a moment, his mind racing as Recovery Girl's words sank in. Emergency surgery. He had hoped that the worst was over, that his son would simply need rest and healing. But now, there was a sense of urgency that weighed heavily on him. He could feel the familiar dread creeping up in his chest. His thoughts kept circling back to one thing. He had failed to protect Izuku once more, and now it was coming back to haunt him. 30 minutes later. 30 minutes had passed since Izuku was rushed away in the ambulance, but the atmosphere outside the USJ was still thick with tension. Class 1A had gathered in small clusters, their voices low, but there was no hiding the exhaustion on their faces. Some students were trying to process what had just happened, while others remained silent, simply trying to catch their breath. Momo, her eyes red from holding back tears, paced back and forth, her mind running over the events. She couldn't shake the image of Izuku's battered body, the way his costume had been torn apart by sheer force, and how close he had come to being lost in the chaos. Jiro had come out of the building, looking around to see where the friends were, and looked to see Momo. When her eyes fell on Momo, pacing restlessly, Jiro felt a knot tighten in her chest. She could see the distress in her friend's posture, the way she held herself together by the thinnest of threads. Without thinking, Jiro made her way over, her footsteps light despite the heavy weight in the air. Momo, Jiro called softly, her voice careful. Hey, are you okay? Where's Izuku? She asked, worriedly looking for one of her green-haired friends. Izuku. Momo started, her voice cracking. He's in surgery right now. Recovery Girl said he needed it immediately. She trailed off, unable to finish the sentence, as worry and guilt threatened to overtake her. Jiro went wide-eyed. What? Is he okay? She said, shaking her slightly. I don't know, Kyoka, she said. He was so hurt that you would barely recognize him. I can't believe it, Jiro murmured, her voice trembling as she processed the information. Izuku, he's always been so strong. How could it get this bad? I don't know, she said as she had tears streaming down her face. Jiro pulled her into a hug as she had tears fill her eyes. You better be okay, nerd, she thought to herself. The police arrived and asked the class questions about what happened. Class 1A had gathered, their eyes tired and full of worry as they waited their turn to answer questions. The tension in the air was thick. Everyone was still processing the chaotic events, and the weight of Izuku's injury hung over them. One by one, the students were called up to give their accounts of what had happened. While that was happening, the teachers talked amongst each other. What do you mean that Nomu thing was meant to take me down? Asked All Might in surprise. That is what I mean. This monster possessed multiple quirks meant to neutralize you and take you down. This so-called League of Villains wanted you dead, said Aizawa with his arm in a cast now. Aizawa, despite his own injuries, was quick to continue, his voice firm and authoritative. They underestimated you, All Might. But this Nomu was a game-changer. If it wasn't for Izuku, it could have been much worse. Nizu nodded at this. Now you do realize one thing. Even if Izuku is heavily injured, and this monster called Nomu was supposed to defeat All Might, that means that Izuku has the power equivalent or more powerful than All Might here. Granted, he can't control, but that means eventually he will. Damn, was all Cementas said, with many others agreeing. This is a matter that must be resolved later, but All Might, go see him, said Nizu as All Might nodded, bolting off. In a matter of minutes, All Might ran down the halls of UA and reached Recovery Girl's room. He transformed back to his skinny form and knocked on the door quickly. Tashinori, she greeted him, her voice soft but stern. I see you're ready to see him. Tashinori nodded, swallowing the lump that had formed in his throat. How is he? Is he stable? Recovery Girl's eyes softened as she stepped aside to let him in. He's stable for now. The surgery was a success, but his body's been through a lot. Healing from the damage he sustained, it will take time. Walking into the room, Tashinori's eyes immediately fell on Izuku's frail form lying in the bed, connected to various machines that beeped rhythmically in the otherwise quiet space. The green-haired boy's face was pale, and the damage to his body was hard to ignore. His arms, legs, and chest wrapped in bandages, his chest gently rising and falling with each breath, though it was clear every movement was a struggle. He went over to sit next to him by the bed and sighed, leaning over it. "I should have been there," Tashinori whispered, his voice hoarse with emotion. "I should have protected him better. Now listen, Tashinori. I'm still pissed after all you have done to this boy for years, but one thing is for certain. You couldn't have known what was going to happen at the USJ," she said, walking over to the bed. "Not what I mean," he said, looking at Izuku's chest. "I said I was going to make it up to him and show him that I would be better, but I wasn't there for him when he needed my strength most," he said sadly. "Try not to dwell on it," she said as she looked at his scans. "Just be here for him," she said, preparing to give Izuku a stamina shot. League of Villains hideout. Shigaraki stumbled out, his hands still trembling, his red eyes burning with a frustrated rage that threatened to consume him. He scratched violently at his neck, the already raw skin flaking beneath his nails. He stalked towards a cracked and grimy bar counter, slamming his hands down on the surface, the force of the impact echoing through the sparsely furnished room. "Hirojiri, who is that brat?" he asked bitterly. "I do not know, Shigaraki," he said, adjusting his tie and walking behind the counter. The monitor flickered to life, displaying the distorted face of a man shrouded in shadow. "Ah, I hear you are back," the voice rasped, laced with a chilling amusement. "How did it go at the USJ? And with All Might?" Shigaraki's fist clenched tighter. The memory of All Might's overwhelming power, combined with the unexpected resilience of the green-haired brat, fueled his anger. "It was a setback," he admitted, the words tasting like ash in his mouth. That child." He spat on the floor, a dark stain blooming on the already grimy surface. "He interfered. He got in the way." "Interfered?" The voice echoed, a hint of curiosity creeping into the tone. "Tell me more." Shigaraki took a couple of deep breaths before speaking. This child with green hair was not only able to beat Nomu, he overtook Nomu, decimated Nomu. And All Might wasn't even there. He beat Nomu on his own. Now, help. "And no, not my Nomu. I spent months on it just to be wasted," said the doctor. "Decimated Nomu." The voice on the monitor echoed, a hint of surprise, and perhaps something else flickering in its tone. "Are you certain, Shigaraki?" Nomu was designed to counter All Might, equipped with multiple quirks specifically chosen for that purpose. For a child to defeat it alone. Shigaraki slammed his fist on the counter again, the cracked surface groaning under the impact. "I saw it with my own eyes. The brat. He unleashed a power I've never seen before. Raw. Untamed. It was like nothing I've ever encountered. Noma didn't stand a chance." Hirojiri, ever the pragmatist, interjected, "Shigaraki's assessment is accurate. While the boy's control over his quirk was erratic, the sheer destructive force he wielded was undeniable. It overwhelmed Nomu, bypassing its enhanced durability and multiple quirks. It was unsettling." The voice on the monitor was silent for a moment, processing this information. "Unsettling indeed," it finally murmured. "Although it is interesting. We have a new task. Find out about this child." "But what about the goal?" asked Shigaraki. "All Might is still a big goal in our plan. This child proves interest. Besides that, this is a huge learning experience for us. Not only that, but we have also shown who we are, and the world will know who we are, Shigaraki, so don't fret. We will meet our goal through," said the screen. Shigaraki clenched his hands together before exhaling deeply. "Yes, Sensei." Class 1A and 1B dorms a few hours later. Class B had been informed of what happened, making everyone shocked. Many asked if they were okay, and some were somewhat jealous that they got to fight villains. Something that made Jiro and few of the others shocked was that Inori rushed out of the doors to go and see Izuku. That was the last thing they expected, but disregarded it for now, as their thoughts were on Izuku. I still can't believe that she won't let us see him, Jiro said, her voice soft but filled with frustration. She hugged her legs to her chest, her eyes focused on the floor as she tried to suppress the flood of emotions rushing through her. Across the room, Momo sat silently, her mind reeling. She's probably just trying to protect us from seeing him like that. It's not easy to face someone you care about in that kind of condition, she said, her voice calm but tinged with sadness. I do hope he will be okay, said Achiko, walking in and sitting next to Jiro. Maybe we were just overthinking this. I mean, Izuku was the only one to hurt, and he heals fast. We shouldn't try to stress about it, said Azui, patting Momo on the shoulder. Yeah, but still, said Jiro, sighing in her legs. I won't lie, Toru said softly, breaking the silence. It was something to behold. Izuku had so much power and energy coming off him. It felt surreal. She paused for a moment, her eyes distant as she recalled the events at the USJ. It was remarkable how he protected Momo and I. Yeah, it was, said Momo, thinking about how Izuku wanted to protect the two of them. It was admirable. Azui looked up to see Izuku's brother, Ichiro, walking around and to the kitchen. Hey, aren't you Izuku's brother? Ribbit. Ichiro looked over to the frog girl in curiosity. Yes, I am. Why? Why haven't you gone to see him? She asked as the other girls looked up at him. He'll be fine. Besides, why would I care about that? He said, starting to walk away from them. Because he is your brother, said Reiko flatly. Oh, please, Izuku is and always will be fine. He needs to realize that he isn't the strongest and to not get in these situations. Oh, in Yairozu. If you ever want to hang, you know where to find me, he said, waving them off. Azui narrowed her eyes in frustration and anger. No wonder why Izuku has such a strained relationship with you. You're an asshole, she said. You got that right. He's been like that for years, said Jiro, glaring at him. Excuse me, he asked threateningly as he glared at Azui. You heard me, Ribbit. You were an asshole. I asked Izuku earlier why he doesn't talk to his brother and sister, and I just found out the reason why. To be honest, I don't blame him. I mean, at least Inori made the effort to go and check on him. Is she an asshole too? She asked, looking to the group. Yes, she is. But like you said, she went to see him, which is better than just staying her prancing around, replied Momo in an instant. Oh, fuck it. I'm done talking, he said, storming off to the kitchen, tired of this. Unbelievable. Azui muttered under her breath, her anger still simmering. Just a heads up to you girls. His siblings are like that all the time to him and other people, said Jiro. What the hell is wrong with his family? How'd he turn out so nice? Most people would have gone off the deep and turned quiet or something, asked Mina, genuinely curious. Momo shook her head. I don't know, but it says a lot about his character. Well, we shouldn't stress too much about him. Everyone in class is worried, so let's take our minds off him for a bit, offered Reiko. The girls agreed and decided to chill out while their classmate was recovering. While the girls were watching a movie they had picked out, Jiro looked back to see Inori was walking back in through the door with a heavy expression on her face. She managed to slip away from the girls and walked over to Inori. Oi! Called out Jiro as she walked up to her with a calm expression. Inori stopped mid-step, her eyes narrowing slightly as she turned to face Jiro. What do you want? She asked, her voice laced with mild irritation. Jiro crossed her arms, not intimidated in the slightest. You tell me. I ain't here to bullshit. Tell me how my friend is doing. Inori nodded at her and sighed. Izuku is still recovery and hasn't woken up yet. He had bandages all over his chest, arms, and legs, making him look like a mummy. They said he would wake up soon, but recovery girl sent me back for some reason, she said. Jiro's expression remained neutral, but she could feel a twinge of irritation at Inori's casual tone. Sent you back, huh? What, did she kick you out? She said that it was getting late and told me to head back, she said. Jiro studied Inori for a moment, trying to gauge whether she was being completely honest or just playing it off. The tension in the air was palpable, and Jiro couldn't help but wonder if there was more to this than Inori was letting on. She wasn't sure what to make of her, especially after seeing how Inori had distanced herself from Izuku for so long. Well, if that is all, then I'll get going, said Jiro as she turned around, but was stopped by Inori with her voice. Inori's voice stopped Jiro in her tracks, her tone softer than before. "Wait, Jiro," she said, her words hanging in the air for a moment. Jiro turned back around, raising an eyebrow. "What's up?" she asked, her arms still crossed, but her expression more open now. She looked around to make sure no one else was around and started to speak. "Listen, firstly, I want to say I am sorry. I am sorry for what I said to you that day when we came on the tour to UA. I am sorry for calling you a lesbian, a bitch, and an assortment of other things. I realize that I fucked up as a sister, and I treated Izuku like garbage. I know you probably won't forgive me for what I did to you and what I did to Izuku for years. I wanted you to know that I am going to be better, and you won't get any problems from me, and I won't give Izuku any problems. I will find a way to be better to him and to everyone else. Just know I am sorry for everything I have done," she said, bowing to her. Jiro stood still for a moment, surprised by the sincerity in Inori's voice. She wasn't expecting an apology, certainly not one this honest and heartfelt. Her usual tough exterior softened, and she uncrossed her arms, her gaze focused intently on Inori. "You really mean that?" Jiro asked, her voice calm, but with a hint of disbelief. "Yes, I am not asking for you to forgive me, and I realize that there's a chance Izuku will never forgive me, but I'm going to do everything I can to make it up to him," she said, standing back up but not making eye contact. "I've been a coward for so long. I didn't want to face the fact that I hurt him, and I didn't want to admit how badly I messed up. But if I'm going to change, I need to face it." Jiro nodded at her. "Well, you were right about one thing. I won't forget what you said to me that day, but it takes balls to admit that you are wrong, and that is the first step. I can't speak for Izuku for if he will ever forgive you or want you back in your life, but do know one thing, though," Jiro continued. "Actions speak louder than words. If you really want to make things right, you're going to have to show it. Not just to Izuku, but to everyone. You can't just say sorry and expect it all to be forgotten. You got to prove it." "I know," she said, looking up at her. "I'm going to get out of your hair," she said, walking away to go and sit on an empty couch. Jiro watched as Inori walked to a couch, her shoulders slumped, carrying the weight of her words. The air between them had shifted, the tension that had once been thick now starting to dissipate. But Jiro couldn't ignore the lingering uncertainty. Was Inori truly going to change? Or was this just another fleeting moment of guilt? With Izuku opened his eyes to see that he wasn't in the hospital room like he thought he was going to be in. He wasn't in his mind space either. This was something different. He looked around to see an empty void with many colors of black, green, red, and many others. Izuku turned around to see energy was forming before him as three figures started to manifest. Izuku blinked in disbelief, his eyes scanning the strange, endless void around him. The colors swirling, black, green, red, and others, seemed to pulse with an otherworldly energy, but the sensations he felt didn't match the fear or confusion he expected. Instead, there was an undeniable sense of power and connection that coursed through his veins. It was as if he had been placed in the heart of something far bigger than himself. Before he could fully process the situation, the energy before him began to shift. It rippled and twisted as three figures slowly manifested out of the chaos, their forms beginning to take shape as they solidified in front of him. Izuku took an instinctive step back, his heart pounding in his chest. His first thought was that he was still dreaming, that his mind was playing tricks on him as he lay in his hospital bed recovering. But as the figures became more defined, there was no denying that this wasn't a dream. This was real. "Hello, Izuku," said the first man. He was a tall man with a black head with silver hair done in a ponytail. Izuku was about to speak, but the man held up a hand. "We do not have much time here, so let us do the talking. I'm the third user of One for All, Bruce, my quirk being Fa Gene. Next to me is Hikid Shinomori, the fourth user, his being Danger Sense. Lastly, the fifth user Baldy over there is Daigoro Banjo, his quirk being Black Whip." Izuku's eyes widened, as if these were the guys that he used to create his quirks from. He wondered why they were here. Bruce continued to speak. "We are here to tell you that what you did evolved the quirks, as I am sure you know, he said, clutching aside from part of him starting to fade away. All right, the way F.A. Gene evolved was like this. F.A. Gene is now able to absorb some kinetic energy from attacks thrown at you. However, it can only absorb about 20% of that energy being unleashed on you. That is why you were able to defeat the creature a bit easier. The fourth user spoke up this time. Danger sense, Hikage said, his voice carrying an aura of wisdom. It has evolved into something far more intricate now. You've always had an instinct to sense danger, but now your danger sense can tap into the very environment around you. It's not just about sensing threats to your life anymore. It's about feeling the intentions and emotions of those near you. You will sense any negative emotion being directed at you. I mean the severe ones, not the casual ones. More like malicious, hostile, or dangerous emotions. Your danger sense has evolved to detect these deeper, more intense feelings, allowing you to identify people with bad intentions or those who may pose a significant threat to you or your loved ones. You will even be able to sense the weight of the air around you. The atmosphere will shift based on the energy surrounding you, giving you a kind of emotional radar. Trust your instincts when you feel this shift because your body will be reacting to things beyond the physical realm, he said as he faded away as well. The fifth user stood up proud to him, smiling. Black Whip, as you have seen, is now able to be spilt with itself to create multiple strands from the same strand. It can also stretch much further than before with it, being able to bend much easier to what you want to shape it, and it will now respond to your emotions better than just your physical input. Just be sure not to get super pissed while using, otherwise you will be in trouble. Izuku nodded as he processes this. He watched as the three users started to fade in out. Before they faded completely, Bruce spoke once more. We shall meet again 10th. Just continue to progress, and you'll be fine. Izuku's breath hitched as the feeling of connection, the power coursing through his veins, seemed to be pulled from him all at once. The energy began to dissipate like a fading storm, and everything around him turned to darkness. The colors, the voices, the sensation of otherworldly power, all of it disappeared, leaving him in a vast nothingness. He felt a sudden jolt, a pull at his core, and in the blink of an eye, everything came crashing back. Thud! Izuku gasped for air as his eyes snapped open, the harsh, sterile light of the hospital room blinding him. His body felt heavy, his head throbbing as if he'd been hit by a freight train. Slowly, he blinked, his vision clearing as he registered the familiar surroundings of the hospital bed. The beeping of machines and the faint smell of antiseptic filled his senses. Ugh! He groaned, rubbing his face with one hand, still reeling from the strange experience he'd just endured. He wasn't sure what had happened, but one thing was clear. Whatever it was, it had left a mark on him. He looked down to see he was covered from head to toe in bandages. His right arm was in a cast, likely from the blow he unleashed on the Nomu. He was hooked up to N4 and looked around the room and saw the sterile white walls and the steady beeping of the machines that monitored his condition. The beeping was oddly soothing, but it also reminded him of the battle that had nearly cost him everything. His mind was still foggy, trying to process the experience in the void, and now he was back, lying in a hospital bed, his body battered and bruised. "Well, hello, young man," said Recovery Girl, walking over to him. Izuku looked over to her and realized how much pain his body was in right now. His entire body was either burning, hurting, or itching from the pain. "Thank you for helping me, Recovery Girl," he said, trying to sit up but was stopped by Recovery Girl's cane. Recovery Girl gave him a gentle but firm look, her eyes sharp despite her kind demeanor. "Don't overdo it, Izuku. You've been through a lot." She placed a hand on his shoulder, urging him to stay still. "You're lucky to be alive after what you did. Your body needs time to heal. I know you're eager to get up, but trust me, rushing it won't help anyone, especially not you." "Is everyone okay?" he asked, leaning back. Recovery Girl nodded, her eyes softening as she gave him a reassuring smile. "Everyone is fine, Izuku. They're all good to go, and you've been out for a while, so don't worry about them. You've taken the worst of the damage, but you're going to make it through," she said, walking over to the other side of him, kicking something on the ground. "Tashinori, wake up. Your son is awake," she said, walking back to the other side of the bed. Wah-huh. All Might's voice was groggy, followed by the sound of rustling fabric. Toshinori got up and looked over to his son with wide eyes. Oh my God, you're awake, he said happily. Why, you were here the whole time, Dad? Izuku asked, very surprised. He hadn't expected his dad to be here for him. Yeah, I have been. Inori was here too for a long while, but Recovery Girl sent her home to get rest, he said, rubbing the sleepiness from his eyes. Izuku still has an expression of surprise on his face as his sister, someone that tortured him for years damn near, came to see if he was okay. Izuku was hit lightly from her cane, but not enough to be hurt. Now listen here, young man. Do you know the injuries you received here today? She said, pulling out a list. You had 6 broken ribs, Izuku. 3 of them were fractured in several places. Your right arm was broken in 2 spots, and both arms sustained multiple lacerations. You also suffered severe muscle tears, particularly in your shoulder area and arm. The bruising was extensive. You're lucky none of the internal damage was more severe. If you had pushed yourself any further during the battle, we might not be having this conversation. Izuku's eyes widened as she spoke, the weight of his injuries hitting him like a ton of bricks. He had been so focused on the fight, on pushing through to protect everyone, that he hadn't even realized how badly his body had been damaged. Hearing Recovery Girl list off the details made it all too real. I didn't realize it was that bad, he muttered, trying to process the full extent of what had happened. His body had been pushed beyond its limits, but it didn't seem to matter when all he cared about was stopping the Nomu, saving his friends, and making sure they were safe. Yeah, you severely hurt yourself in the process, she said, somewhat annoyed. I can tell, he said, smiling slightly, and winced under the pain. Recovery Girl sighed as she backed over to him. Listen, as hurt as you are on your upper body, your lower body is good to go. You'll hurt a lot for the next 12 hours in your arms and chest area, but I'll need to give you a few more treatments tomorrow before you are healed for your upper body, she said. Does that mean I can go back to the dorms? He asked. Yes, that does, but so help me God, Izuku, if you do something stupid, I will beat you, she said threateningly with her cane. Izuku chuckled weakly at her words, but nodded in understanding. Got it, ma'am. I'll try not to get into trouble. Recovery Girl huffed, but seemed satisfied for now. I'll hold you to that. Now, get some rest before you head back. I don't want to see you stumbling around the dorms like a zombie. Toshinori stood up as he was prepared to help Izuku. You want to ride to the dorms, son? He asked. Yeah, that'll be nice, he said, pushing through the pain and sitting up. Toshinori moved closer, offering his arm for support. Izuku hesitated for a moment before taking it, gripping tightly as he swung his legs over the edge of the hospital bed. The sharp ache in his ribs and arms flared up instantly, making him suck in a breath, but he refused to let it show too much. He had been through worse. He could handle this. Easy now, Toshinori said, his voice laced with concern. No need to rush. I know, Izuku muttered, adjusting to the movement. He hated feeling so weak, so dependent, but he also knew there was no way he was making it back to the dorms on his own without collapsing halfway there. As he stood, the shift in weight sent another jolt of pain through his upper body. His face twitched, but he straightened his posture. Toshinori gave him a careful once-over before nodding approvingly. Recovery Girl watched from the side, arms crossed. You boys take care. And Izuku, she added, pointing her cane at him one last time, if I hear that you aggravated your injuries, I will personally drag you back here myself. Izuku gave a weak thumbs up. Understood. Toshinori and Izuku walked in silence for a while as they made their way to the vehicle with his dad opening the door for him. Izuku carefully eased himself into the passenger seat, his sore muscles protesting every slight movement. Toshinori closed the door behind him before walking around to the driver's side and sliding in. Toshinori kept glancing at his son with worry before speaking. Sorry, son, he said quietly. Izuku raised a brow, but let him continue. Sorry I wasn't there to help or defeat that Nomu thing. You had to step up to the plate for my absence. I'm sorry I failed you again, he said sincerely. Dad, Izuku started, his voice soft. While I'm still pissed at you for how I've been treated these past years, Just know the USJ and that Nomu creature or whatever it was is not your fault. You physically could not have known that that was going to happen in the first place. Plus, I saw that you stopped several incidents this morning, meaning that you used all your time. Tashinori's hands tightened on the steering wheel as he took in Izuku's words. I'm still sorry, though, Tashinori murmured, his voice tinged with regret. I should have been there, even if I couldn't have anticipated that exact situation. As a hero, I should have been able to protect you. I get it, Dad, said Izuku, adjusting himself. But that wasn't your fault. A lot of stuff is your fault, but the villains and that Nomu thing wasn't. Tashinori nodded as he looked back to his son. There was a silence between the two of them when Izuku spoke up again. You said Inori came to see me earlier, he asked, holding onto the door handle as he turned the corner. Yes, she did. I texted her and Ichiro, and she rushed in after a few minutes. I texted her. She had looked worried the whole time. Ichiro didn't show up, though, he said quietly. Izuku had a blank expression as he thought about it. Inori showing was a surprise, while Ichiro not showing wasn't. Though he didn't express, he was glad Inori stopped messing with him. Not much was said between them as Tashinori pulled up to the dorms. He got out and opened the car door for him, and Izuku stepped out with some pain. Do you need any more help, Izuku? He asked. I think I'm good. I need to be quiet since it's like 3 in the morning right now, and I don't want to wake anyone up, he said, adjusting his cast. Are you sure? He asked, just wanted to make sure. Izuku gave a small, reassuring smile, despite the exhaustion etched across his face. I'm sure, Dad. I got this, he said, adjusting the weight on his injured limbs. Tashinori didn't look convinced, but he gave a reluctant nod. All right, son. Just be careful. If you need anything, don't hesitate to call me. His voice was thick with concern, his brow furrowed even as he tried to mask it with a smile. Izuku stuck out his left hand with a bit of pain as he wanted to shake his hand. Thanks for driving me back here and staying by me. He hesitated only for a moment before reaching out and grasping his son's hand. The grip was firm, but there was an unspoken understanding between them. You're welcome, son, Tashinori replied quietly. Take care of yourself. They let go of the handshake, and Izuku opened the front door quietly as he walked into the huge open area. He saw his dad drive off and sighed. He hurt like hell and wasn't sure how his legs didn't get the slightest bit damaged in that fight. Izuku did know he was freezing, and when he looked down, and his sweat dropped. I don't have a shirt on. That explains why I'm cold right now, he thought. He looked up and saw that one of the community TVs was on, and he walked over quietly, seeing that a few of the girls were sleeping on the couch, assuming they had watched a movie. Izuku's steps were slow and deliberate as he made his way into the common area, trying to minimize the noise with every movement. The dim light from the community TV flickered in the quiet space, casting long shadows across the room. As he approached the couch, he saw that Jiro, Momo, Ibara, and a few of the other girls were asleep on the floor and couches. He assumed they were watching a movie, and he smiled sadly. I definitely worried some of them with what I did, he thought as he looked at all of them. He saw they were all not covered up with blankets. He quietly made his way to the small storage closet near the wall, moving with the precision of someone who had been awake longer than he cared to admit. His eyes flickered over the soft blankets and extra pillows that had been carelessly tossed aside earlier. He grabbed with a grunted effort and placed the blankets on them, making sure not to wake them. He looked at Momo, who he could tell was crying as her black hair lay across a pillow. He looked over to Jiro, who had the same look on her face, and frowned. Yeah, Kyoka and Momo are definitely pissed at me for hurting myself, but I had to so that everyone would stay safe, he thought to himself. He was soon done placing the blankets and decided it was time for bed. He wouldn't wake them now. He knew they needed rest. If he had to guess, a few of the girls were worried about him, and they distracted themselves with a movie night. He slowly made his way up the stairs to his room, where rest awaited him. Izuku turned the handle to his room and stepped inside. The familiar smell of his room greeted him, and he let out a breath, glad to finally be alone. He closed the door behind him and made his way over to his bed. The moment he sat down, he winced, feeling the sharp sting of pain in his side and arms. He adjusted his cast and covered himself with his blanket. He could only hope Cell Surge would kick in and heal him somewhat. Dorm's next morning. Jiro inhaled deeply, stretching outward as the morning light of the sun shined through the glass windows. The gentle warmth of the sun on her skin felt comforting, almost like a soft embrace after the tense night. It was a new day, but the memories of the previous one still lingered in her mind. The worry for Izuku, the fear she had felt at not seeing him and wondering if he was okay. She was confused as to why a blanket was on her now, because she didn't have one last night. Her fingers brushed over the soft fabric as realization set in. Someone had placed it over her. Someone who had been awake after she and the others had fallen asleep. She thought it was one of the girls after the movie night. She looked at the clock to see it was 7 a.m. and sighed. She was going to get up and see if she could see Izuku in a hospital. That damn nerd, always wanting to protect others and not give a damn about himself. It pisses me off, she thought, annoyed at him. Slowly, Jiro pushed herself off the couch, careful not to disturb Momo, who was still curled up beneath her own blanket. She looked and smirked as Azui was rib-biting in her sleep, making her chuckle. She maneuvered around the others and walked her way to the kitchen. She needed coffee bad. She walked in to see that someone was already in there. Izuku. Her breath hitched as she looked at him looking into the fridge. His right arm in a cast with his other arm bandaged completely, as well as parts of his chest. Izuku sighed as he pulled out a protein shake, shaking it up and turned around to see a startled Jiro standing in the doorway. He saw her start to shake and smiled at her. Hi Kyoka, he said with a tired smile. Jiro stomped over to him, her hands clenched into fists at her sides. Izuku, despite some of his battle experience, felt a chill run down his spine as he took a step back. He then felt her wrap her arms around him in a hug in a way not to hurt him. You dumb ass, Jiro whispered, her voice muffled against his chest. Do you have any idea how worried we were? How worried I was. Izuku stood frozen, his eyes wide as he felt Jiro's arms around him. He could feel her trembling slightly, her grip tight yet careful, as if she were afraid he'd disappear if she let go. His tired mind struggled to process the situation. Jiro wasn't usually this openly affectionate. I'm sorry, he said quietly. If I didn't do anything, then Mr. Aizawa, Momo, Hagakure, and I would be... Jiro pulled back slightly, her hands gripping the fabric of his shirt tightly. Yes, I know. You would be hurt or worse. You don't need to throw yourself in a battle like this. But, Kyoka, this is the first time I've ever done something like that, he replied back to her. Jiro frowned, her grip on his shirt tightening. That's not the point, Izuku, she muttered, her voice laced with frustration. Even if this is the first time, it doesn't change the fact that you need to be careful. Do you know how it felt not knowing if you'd make it back in one piece? Izuku opened his mouth to respond, but found himself at a loss for words. He had always been focused on protecting others, never really stopping to think about how his actions affected those around him. He glanced down at Jiro, noticing the slight redness in her eyes. Had she been crying before she woke up? His heart clenched at the thought. Jiro sighed, running a hand through her messy bed hair before stepping back. Look, I get it. You feel responsible. You always do. But at the very least, make sure that you stop and think about making sure you come back in one piece, please. Izuku stared at her for a long moment before nodding slowly. I'll try, he said, his voice soft. Jiro sighed, her shoulders sagging as some of her tension eased. Good, she murmured. Because if you pull something like that again, I swear I'll smack some sense into me. Izuku finished for her with a small, tired smile. Jiro huffed, but smirked. Damn right. She finally stepped back, giving Izuku a little breathing room. He took a sip of his protein shake, and, for a moment, the two just stood there in comfortable silence. It was a rare, quiet moment between them, one that neither of them wanted to ruin just yet. The peaceful moment, however, didn't last long. Izuku. Both turned to see Momo standing in the doorway, her eyes widening in shock as she took in his injured state. You're awake, she gasped, rushing over to him. She wrapped him in a hug, and he winced in pain as she squeezed him tight. Momo, you were kind of squeezing. Our friend here, said Jiro, somewhat jealous. Momo quickly pulled back, her face flushing red as she realized what she had done. "Oh, I'm so sorry, Izuku. I didn't mean to hurt you," she exclaimed, her hands hovering over his shoulders as if she wanted to help but didn't know how. Izuku chuckled weakly, rubbing the spot where she had squeezed him. "It's okay, Momo. Just a little sore." Jiro crossed her arms, raising an eyebrow at Momo. "A little sore? Your whole body looks like it's been through a meat grinder, dude," she said, unimpressed. "But when did you come back? Why didn't you wake us up?" she asked, hovering over him. "I didn't want to wake you all up so you could sleep. I got blankets for all of you, cause some of you didn't have them," he said, taking a sip of his protein shake. Jiro gave Izuku a skeptical look, clearly not buying his explanation. "You think we wouldn't have wanted to wake up and help you?" she asked, her voice a little sharper than usual. Izuku lowered his gaze, feeling the weight of her words. "I know, but you were all already so exhausted, and I didn't want to worry anyone more than I had to." He let out a small sigh, massaging his sore shoulder. "Besides, I knew you'd all be angry if you saw how messed up I really was." Momo, who had been standing silently for a moment, stepped forward, her brows furrowed in concern. "Izuku, we're not angry. We're worried." "Then why does Kyoko look like she is about to strangle me?" he asked, trying to calm her down. Jiro's earphone jacks twitched in annoyance. "Because you're sitting or looking like you came out of an Egyptian coffin right now." Izuku let out a quiet laugh, though it was quickly followed by a wince. "I'm really not that bad," he mumbled, but he could feel the burn of his sore muscles and the bruises that covered his body. His friends were right. He definitely looked worse than he felt. Cell Surge took care of him pretty decently. Soon everyone had some downstairs to see their class president back from the fight with Nomu, and Izuku was glad for the attention, but his was a bit much for him. Izuku sat back against the couch, the noise of his classmates' chatter swirling around him. Everyone was relieved to see him awake, and while he appreciated their concern, it was overwhelming. His body ached from the battle, his muscles sore, and his bruises still fresh, but it was the emotional toll that was the hardest to shake. Even with the soft hum of their voices filling the space, he felt a strange kind of loneliness. Not that anyone was being distant, quite the opposite. In fact, they were all hovering around him, asking questions, offering support. He found out that both classes had the day off from admin to recover, and he was fine with that. He still needed to be healed to 100%, and he was feeling around 67% right now. Some people in class showed a mix of concern, happiness, and some jealousy they got to miss out on a fight. Ibra saw him and went up to hug him and said he was glad he was okay. Izuku felt his cheeks burn slightly as he watched Mineta squirm from the corner of his eye, trying to sneak a glance at some of the girls in Class B who were doting on him. Ibra, on the other hand, seemed genuine in her care as she pulled him into a gentle hug. "I'm glad you're okay, Izuku," she said softly, her voice filled with sincerity. He was taken aback, not expecting the hug, but appreciating the warmth of it. "Teach thanks, Ibra," he muttered, a faint smile tugging at his lips despite the dull throb in his body. Conversation continued, though Izuku saw a few UA teachers coming up to them. He saw Recovery Girl, which meant she was here for his finishing treatment. He also saw Hound Dog, All Might, and what looked like a detective approach the building. The arrival of the teachers shifted the atmosphere slightly. The lively chatter of the students quieted down, replaced by a murmur of greetings and acknowledgments. Izuku, despite the lingering ache in his body, straightened up a bit, a sense of respect and a touch of anxiety settling over him. Recovery Girl, her face etched with concern, made a beeline for him, her steps brisk and purposeful. "All right, dear. Let's get you back to full health," Recovery Girl said, preparing a stamina shot to counteract the drain from her quirk. She administered the shot with practiced ease, her touch gentle despite the efficiency of the process. She gave him a long kiss on his right arm, and he felt all the pain in his body leave him. He could move his arms just fine now, and he felt revitalized. The revitalizing effects of Recovery Girl's quirk washed over Izuku, the lingering aches and pains fading into a distant memory. He flexed his arms, testing their newfound mobility, a relieved sigh escaping his lips. "Thank you, Recovery Girl," he said, a genuine smile gracing his features. "I feel much better now," he said, taking off her cast. "You're welcome, dear," Recovery Girl replied, her eyes still holding a hint of concern. "But remember, even with my quirk, recovery takes time. Don't push yourself too hard, and make sure you get plenty of rest. Take 2 days of rest starting now." "Yes, ma'am," he said, nodding. All Might walked up to him, smiling, as always as he tapped him on the shoulder. "I am sorry, young Izuku, but being you were passed out yesterday. This detective here would like to speak with you," he said, gesturing to him. "The name is Detective Naomasa Tsukachi." The man introduced himself, his sharp yet kind eyes studying Izuku carefully. "I work with the police and have been assigned to investigate the events that took place during the recent attack." Izuku straightened his posture, his fingers unconsciously tightening into a loose fist. "Of course, Detective. I'll answer anything you need." "Good, then, let us go to the private room," he said, looking at the curious students. Class 1A and 1B watch Izuku walked into the room with All Might and this detective guy they saw yesterday. "I forgot Yagi bro fought that big bird-looking dude yesterday. I heard that it was stronger than All Might." But Kugo scoffed. "Bullshit. Izuku is nowhere near the strength of the #1 hero," he said, feeling a presence behind him. It was Hound Dog, and he carried an immense presence. "Good morning, everyone. I am Hound Dog, but more importantly, I am here to talk to anyone who was at the USJ yesterday. It is optional, of course, but I need to speak to 3 individuals. Ichiro Yagi, Inori Yagi, and Katsuki Bakugo," he said, walking to a private room, gesturing the 3 to go to him. The 3 friends didn't understand what was happening, but decided to listen to the teacher. Inside the private room, Detective Tsukachi gestured for Izuku to sit. All Might closed the blinds to the room and got out of his buff form and stood beside Izuku, his usual boisterous demeanor replaced by a serious expression. The detective pulled out a small notepad and a pen, his movements precise and deliberate. "All right, Yagi," Tsukachi began, his voice calm and measured. "I understand you were involved in a significant altercation yesterday at the USJ. We've received reports of unusual activity, including the appearance of a powerful creature and the use of potentially dangerous quirks. Can you tell me everything you remember about what happened?" Izuku took a deep breath, trying to organize his thoughts. He recounted the events of the day, starting from the initial attack to his own confrontation with the Nomu. He talked about him saving Eraserhead from the Nomu, as well as fighting it by pushing his limits. He also talked about how the villains had the agenda to kill All Might, as well as the creature having the same strength as All Might. Tsukachi listened intently, occasionally interrupting with clarifying questions. He jotted down notes, his pen scratching against the paper. All Might remained silent, his eyes fixed on Izuku, a mixture of pride and concern etched on his face. He was proud of Izuku's bravery and quick thinking, but concerned about the burden he was carrying. Izuku cleared his throat before speaking once more. "I do have a question about the Nomu." "I didn't kill, did I?" he asked worriedly. Tsukachi paused, his pen hovering over his notepad. He exchanged a brief glance with All Might before turning back to Izuku. "No, Izuku, you did not kill the Nomu. It was apprehended. It's currently in secure custody, not to mention the fact that Nomu isn't human. So, you have nothing to worry about." Izuku exhaled deeply. "Good. I didn't think about it till this morning, and it made me worried." Tsukachi nodded. "That is all right. This thing is not human, and you defended your peers and teachers. You did the right thing," he said, closing his notepad and standing up. "Well, kid, I think that is all I have for you. Coming from the police force. Thank you for helping and stopping that abomination," he said, sticking out to shake his hand. Izuku hesitated for a moment before firmly grasping Tsukachi's hand, shaking it with a determined grip. "I just did what I had to do," he said, his voice steady. "I couldn't stand by and let my friends get hurt." Tsukachi gave him a small, approving nod before glancing at All Might. "Well, that concludes my questioning for now. If I need any further information, I'll reach out to UA." "Sounds good," said Izuku as they made their way out of the room. Perfect timing," said Hound Dog, approaching them. "I need to speak with you, Yagi." "Follow me," he said. Izuku blinked in surprise, but nodded, following Hound Dog as the pro hero led him down the hall to another private room. All Might and Tsukachi exchanged glances before All Might gave him a reassuring nod. As the door closed behind them, Hound Dog gestured for Izuku to take a seat. The pro hero's usual growl-like tone softened slightly, but the serious expression remained. I won't take too much of your time, but after speaking with Detective Tsukachi and hearing the accounts of your classmates, I have a few things to go over with you. Izuku straightened in his chair. Of course, sir. Hound Dog crossed his arms. Let's start with the obvious. The way you fought the Nomu wasn't something a regular student should have been capable of. I know you pushed yourself beyond your limits, and I also know that kind of exertion comes with consequences. His sharp eyes locked onto Izuku's. How are you holding up, really? Izuku hesitated before answering. I feel fine now. Recovery Girl's quirk helped a lot. I know I pushed myself too hard, but at the time, I didn't see another choice. Good. But I have something for us to do while we talk, he said, pulling out chess. You want to play chess while we talk? Asked Izuku, confused. Izuku looked at the chessboard, still slightly confused. Hound Dog's intense demeanor made it hard to imagine him sitting down for a game of strategy, but he wasn't about to question it. He nodded, sitting up straighter as Hound Dog began setting up the pieces. Yes, Hound Dog confirmed, his tone unwavering. Chess is a game of strategy, patience, and adaptation. You displayed all of those traits yesterday, but I need to see how you think when you're not under life or death pressure. Plus, it helps keep the conversation flowing. He finished arranging the pieces and gestured for Izuku to make the first move. Izuku studied the board for a moment before pushing his pawn forward. All right, I'll do my best. Hound Dog made his move quickly, his eyes never leaving Izuku. So, I had meetings with your siblings in Bakugo, he said, moving a pawn forward. How'd that go? I know you can't say what happened because of confidentiality reasons, but how was it? Asked Izuku curiously as he moved one of his pawns. Interesting to say the least, he said, thinking back to each other their meetings. Flashback, Bakugo's appointment. The door to the room slammed open with a loud bang, and Bakugo stormed inside, his usual scowl fixed firmly on his face. His hands were balled into fists, his posture rigid with irritation, but his eyes, those fiery, sharp eyes, betrayed a mix of frustration and confusion. Hound Dog didn't even flinch at the noise. He simply glanced up from his desk, his expression calm and unflinching, though his sharp gaze never wavered. Sit down, Bakugo, Hound Dog said, his voice low but firm. There was no room for argument in his tone. Bakugo huffed and practically threw himself into the chair, his shoulders hunched as if every inch of his being was already preparing for an argument. His usual air of defiance was thick in the room, and Hound Dog was aware that this conversation would not be easy. So, what the hell do you want? Bakugo growled, not even bothering to look at the pro hero. Hound Dog leaned back in his chair, his claws tapping idly against the desk. I want to talk about the USJ incident. You were there. Yeah, I saw, Bakugo snapped, his eyes flashing with irritation. All I know is that damn Deku went in and hurt himself. It was pathetic and weak. Hound Dog's eyes narrowed slightly, his voice calm but sharp as ever. You think Izuku is weak? Bakugo's face twisted in contempt. Yeah, I do. He doesn't belong in this school, let alone in the damn hero program. He's a liability. Always has been. Hound Dog leaned forward slightly, his gaze steady. That thing he fought, the Nomu, it was as strong as All Might. You can't honestly tell me you think that was weak. That wasn't luck, Bakugo. Like hell it was. Deku is someone that is going to die because he is an idiot and throwing himself into danger, he said, crossing his arms. Hound Dog narrowed his eyes for a moment. Why do you call him Deku? I have heard you and Izuku's brother call him that. Bakugo scoffed, leaning back in his chair as if the question annoyed him. Because that's what he is, he said, his voice laced with venom. A useless loser who should have never even thought about being a hero. Hound Dog's eyes remained steady. That's not what I asked. I asked why you call him that. Bakugo's jaw tightened. His fingers tapped against his arm in irritation. It doesn't matter. Hound Dog tilted his head slightly. It does. Words have power, Bakugo. The way you speak about Izuku, the way you speak to him, it's not just random insults. There's something behind it. Bakugo's scowl deepened. TCH. It started as a joke, all right? When we were kids, he always clung to me and his siblings, tried to keep up. It pissed me off. He was weak, always crying, always looking to me like I was some kind of damn hero. He should have known his place. I called him Deku because that's all he'd ever be, useless. Hound Dog observed him carefully. And yet, you're the one storming in here, frustrated about what he did. That's not the point. He is supposed to be weak. I refuse to believe that he will ever be strong as or stronger than All Might, he yelled out. Hound Dog remained unfazed, his sharp eyes locked onto Bakugo's trembling fists. You refuse to believe it, or you're afraid to? Bakugo's body tensed as if struck by an invisible force. I ain't afraid of that damn nerd, he shouted, but the usual confidence in his voice wavered, just for a second. Hound Dog leaned forward, his elbows resting on the desk. You just admitted that Izuku fought something as strong as All Might. That he threw himself into danger, knowing he could die, and still managed to hold his ground. That doesn't sound like someone weak to me. That sounds like someone willing to go beyond his limits. Bakugo clenched his jaw so tight it hurt. He was reckless. He doesn't think. He just jumps in like an idiot and gets himself hurt. That's not strength. That's desperation. Hound Dog hummed thoughtfully. And yet, you're the one sitting here, fists clenched, voice raised. If you were truly as useless as you claim, would you be this worked up about it? Bakugo's eyes burned with frustration. He gritted his teeth, shaking his head. That's not. He forced himself to stand up, his chair scraping against the floor. I don't need to listen to this crap. Can we be done? Hound Dog exhaled slowly, his expression unreadable as he watched Bakugo stand there, rigid with frustration. He could see the conflict boiling under the surface, the emotions the boy refused to acknowledge. Fine, we can be done, he said, setting down his pen. You will be returning here next week for another session. Bakugo's face twisted in irritation. The hell I will. I ain't coming back here to listen to this crap again. Hound Dog remained calm, his unwavering gaze locking onto Bakugo's fiery eyes. It's not optional. Bakugo clenched his fists, sparks crackling between his fingers. You can't make me. Hound Dog leaned forward slightly, his sharp teeth just barely visible as he spoke in a firm, almost growling voice. You're not the only one affected by the USJ incident, Bakugo. Your teachers, your classmates, even All Might himself. Everyone saw what happened. Everyone saw Izuku Yagi put himself on the line. Bakugo flinched. Hound Dog noticed, but didn't comment on it. You may leave. Bakugo didn't hesitate to storm out of the office, slamming the door behind him with a loud bang. His breathing was heavy, his fists still clenched tightly at his sides as he walked down the hallway. That damn bastard. That damn nerd. That damn Deku. I can't let him get better than me. I need to train, he thought, as he walked away to work on his quirk. Flashback, Ichiro's appointment. All right, Ichiro Yagi. Would you like to tell me anything to start this conversation out? Asked Hound Dog. Not really. Why am I here? Ichiro asked, shuffling around. We're here just to talk. Talk about anything really, said Hound Dog, leaning back in his chair. Your brother fought in the USJ against that creature everyone is talking about. How do you feel about that? He seems quite strong. TCH, Deku isn't that strong, he said, grumbling. Oh, that's interesting. Hound Dog mused, tapping a clawed finger against the desk. From what I've gathered, he held his own against the Nomu, a creature designed to take down All Might. That takes a level of strength most people don't have. Ichiro scoffed, crossing his arms. He just got lucky. If it weren't for that healing lady, he'd be in a hospital bed right now. He's reckless, not strong. Hound Dog hummed thoughtfully. Reckless, perhaps. But strength isn't just about brute force. It's about determination, quick thinking, and endurance. From what I've seen, Izuku has all three. Ichiro's jaw clenched slightly, but he didn't respond. Hound Dog let the silence settle between them before changing the subject. What about you, Ichiro? How do you feel about what happened? About Izuku putting himself in danger? Ichiro scoffed again, looking away. I don't care. He does what he wants. It's not my problem. If he wants to do that, then he can go right ahead. Hound Dog studied him for a moment before making a note in his book. All right, if that's all you have to say, you're free to go. Here is another time for out session next week. What? I have to come back, asked Ichiro, annoyed. Yeah, you do. Not negotiable, he said, watching the teen huff out of the room. Flashback, Inori's appointment. Inori sat across from Hound Dog, her arms crossed tightly over her chest. Her expression was something like she was being scolded, and she had etched worry on her face. So, what's this about? She asked. Hound Dog rested his elbows on the desk, his claws steepled together. I just want to talk. Your brother was involved in the USJ attack, and I want to hear your thoughts on it. Well, I'm glad he's fine. I went to see him yesterday, and he was hurt badly. I'm glad he's okay now, though, she said, looking up at him. Hound Dog nodded, his keen eyes observing Inori's body language. It's good that you're relieved he's all right. But let's dig a little deeper. How did you feel when you first heard about the attack? Inori bit her lip, her fingers gripping the fabric of her sleeve. Honestly, I was scared, she admitted. Sometimes villain attacks are no joke, and when I saw how much he was bandaged up, it made me pretty worried. Hound Dog nodded, his gaze steady as he observed her reaction. That's a reasonable response. But let's talk about that worry and something else. Would you say you have a strong relationship with Izuku? Inori frowned. No, I don't. It's my fault for that, but still. Hound Dog tilted his head slightly, his sharp eyes studying her. Why do you think it's your fault? Inori gripped her knees with a frown deepening. Because I know it is. Well, how do I put this? I used to bully Izuku. A lot. Ichiro and Kaken did too. Bakugo, she said, forgetting to use his real name. Hound Dog remained quiet for a moment, processing her words. His sharp gaze softened just slightly, recognizing the weight of her confession. You used to bully him? He asked gently, his voice not judgmental but probing. Inori nodded, her eyes avoiding his. Yeah, I didn't always treat him well. It got bad for a while. I will admit, I hurt him emotionally and physically. A lot. I stopped doing that about 9 or 10 months ago now. Still, though, I doubt our relationship is ever go to mend or heal, she said, starting to get teary-eyed. She wiped her eyes for a second before speaking. I know he'll likely never forgive me, and I don't hold it against him if he did. I really messed up. I hurt him in more ways than one. Inori, Hound Dog began softly. What you did in the past, that's something you'll have to live with. However, what you're doing now is something that is the first step to doing the right thing. You are acknowledging what you did. Now I will get into specifics of what you did to Izuku now, because I think that I've asked enough for today. But know that it will be a long road from here on out. I understand, she said quietly, her voice shaky as she wiped away another tear. I know it's not going to be easy, and I don't expect things to just magically get better. I just wish I could take back what I did. But I know I can't. Hound Dog nodded, his eyes never leaving hers. Regret and acknowledgement are important, Inori. But you have to understand, what you did to Izuku hurt him in ways that won't simply fade with an apology. It's going to take time, patience, and effort on your part. Your words are the beginning, but your actions will show whether you're truly willing to change. I think that is all I have if you would like to leave, he said, gesturing to the door. Right? Thank you, sir, she said, walking out of the door, making sure she had no tears in her eyes. We could do another of these sessions, right? Of course, he said, smiling at her. Flashback end. Hound Dog moved his knight and sighed. Like you said, I can't tell you much because of the confidentiality you talked about, but I will say one thing. In this profession, you never get bored of the people because of personalities and how they function. I guess that makes sense, Izuku said, watching as Hound Dog studied the board, his sharp claws hovering over a piece before finally moving a pawn forward. Everyone has their own way of thinking, and sometimes it's complicated. Hound Dog nodded. Complicated is an understatement, but yes. People have layers, Izuku. They aren't just good or bad. Sometimes people act out of fear, other times out of guilt, and sometimes they don't even understand their own emotions. Izuku frowned slightly, considering his next move. You're talking about Bakugo, aren't you? He asked as he slid his rook into position. Hound Dog's ears twitched, but he neither confirmed nor denied the assumption. I'm talking about more than just him, he said simply, countering with his knight. Your siblings, your classmates, hell, even pro-heroes. Everyone has moments where they struggle with their emotions and how they express them. Izuku exhaled, staring at the board but not really seeing it. I just don't get it, he admitted. Why do they still see me like I'm weak? After everything, Hound Dog tapped a claw against the side of the board. Because change isn't something people accept easily, especially when it disrupts how they view the world. If you are always weak in their eyes, then seeing you strong forces them to reconsider everything they thought they knew. That's not easy for some people. Check. Izuku frowned, deep in thought. I understand what you're saying, but sometimes it just feels like no matter how much I change or improve, they still see me as the same old Izuku, the one who couldn't even stand up for himself before. He moved his knight, attempting to take a more defensive position on the board. Hound Dog's expression softened, but only slightly. That's the thing about people. They hold on to old perceptions, especially if those perceptions align with their comfort zone. It's easier to keep you in that box where they know how to deal with you. When you change, when you push against that, it's uncomfortable. And when people are uncomfortable, they either resist or react in ways that seem harsh. Checkmate. Damn it, said Izuku. Not bad for you first time playing with me, said Hound Dog. I get what you mean. I get people can change. I now some refuse to change, but this whole situation with my family is a big pile of papers that just keeps getting bigger and getting more and more unsorted, said Izuku. Yeah, it's understandable, but that pile will stop piling up and will be organized soon. I can assure you that, Izuku. That and keep up the good work with schooling and heroics and all that. Just be sure not to throw yourself in and make up a plan on a whim like you did fighting that Nomu, said Hound Dog. You don't have to remind me of that one, Izuku said with a sheepish grin, rubbing the back of his neck. That was a bit much, I guess. I was just trying to do what I thought was right. But I can't afford to make mistakes like that again. That's okay. You make mistakes to learn from them. That is why you are here attending this school, he said, click his pen. Do you have any more questions before you go? He asked. No, sir. Thank you for your help, said Izuku, standing up. Izuku stood up, stretching his arms slightly after the long conversation. He had learned a lot from his time with Hound Dog, both about himself and the people around him. There was a lot of truth in what the older man had said. The weight of people's perceptions, the complexity of their emotions, and the challenges that came with changing how others viewed you. It was all a lot to process. But hearing it from someone who had experience in understanding people's minds made it easier to accept. Izuku still had a lot to figure out, but now he felt a little less lost. Hound Dog set the chessboard aside, his gaze softening as he watched Izuku. You're welcome, Izuku. Just remember, this isn't about getting everything right all at once. It's about growth. Every mistake, every wrong move is part of that growth. And just like with the game, you'll get better the more you play. Izuku nodded, offering a small smile. Yeah, I understand. Thanks again, he said, leaving. As Izuku stepped out into the hallway, the quiet hum of the dormitory filled the air. He let out a slow breath, running a hand through his messy green hair as he processed everything Hound Dog had said. Growth wasn't something that happened overnight, nor was it something he could force others to recognize. He had to be patient. But patience wasn't always his strongest suit, especially when it came to proving himself. His feet moved on their own as he walked down the corridor, his mind still swirling with thoughts. The idea that people held onto old perceptions of him, that they resisted seeing him as anything but weak, gnawed at him. He knew Hound Dog was right, but that didn't make it any less frustrating. Before he realized it, he was outside, the cool night air brushing against his skin. The UA campus was quiet at this hour, most students having settled into their dorms or training privately. He found himself staring up at the sky, the stars twinkling against the vast darkness. You look like you're thinking too hard again. Izuku saw Todoroki eating soba with a blank look on his face. Todoroki? What's up? The sky, he said with the same blank expression. Izuku smiled at the joke, shaking his head. Didn't take you for the type to crack jokes, Todoroki. Todoroki shrugged, slurping up another bite of his soba. I've been working on it. Fuyumi says I should try being more social. Fuyumi? Asked Izuku, confused. Oh, she's my sister. I am considered the baby of the family. You have Toya the eldest, and his Frost Flare. I recognized you from the sludge villain incident. Then there is Fuyumi, my elder sister. Next is my brother Natsuo, and then there is me, he said, pointing to himself with his chopsticks. That a pretty big family, said Izuku as he walked alongside him. Yeah, we manage, he said, eating a bit more of his soba. I bet it's a lot of weight on your shoulders having your brother and father being big heroes. With Frost Flare being 39th and Endeavor being 2nd on the hero charts, said Izuku, trying to get another convo started. Todoroki paused, his chopsticks hovering over his bowl as he considered Izuku's words. There was a moment of silence before he responded, his voice quieter than usual. It does feel like a lot, sometimes, he said, his gaze dropping to the soba in his bowl. I never asked for this life, but it's the one I was given. People expect a lot from me because of my father and my brother. Sometimes it feels like they forget about me, or that I'm just living in their shadows. Yeah, well, I heard you did pretty well and gonna get some backup when the USJ happened, Izuku said. I wasn't bad, but I still felt weird trying to leave when I felt I could help, he said, setting his bowl down. Izuku nodded, understanding where Todoroki was coming from. Sometimes you just have to make a choice, even if it feels like you're abandoning someone in the process. Todoroki sighed, running a hand through his hair. Yeah, I didn't want to be like everyone else, just standing on the sidelines while others got hurt. But at the same time, I couldn't risk making the situation worse by rushing in without a plan. I mean, you did make the right call in the end. Sometimes it's not about being the hero everyone expects, but being smart about it, Izuku added, trying to offer some reassurance. Todoroki looked up at him, his expression softening. Thanks. It's hard to balance what everyone expects of me with what I feel is the right thing to do. No problem. But I'm going to go chill out for a bit, said Izuku as he waved him off. See you around, Yagi, he said, waving back. Izuku sighed as he went to and plumped himself on his bed. He would chill out for a bit because these past 24 hours were crazy for him. He took a 2-hour nap before he started to design ideas for a new hero costume. It was pulverized in that fight with Nomu, and he needed something better. He heard a knock on his door, but he continued to draw as he called out to the person. Come in. Achiko, Mina, and Reiko peeked around the corner to see Izuku was hard at work. It's time for dinner, said Achiko. All right, thanks, guys. I'll be down in a minute, he said, not looking at them. Achiko sighed as she walked behind him and pulled on him. You were injured yesterday, and you have barely eaten today. Let's get going, she said, tugging on him. Uraraka, please just give me a minute, said Izuku, whining. Achiko frowned, determined not to back down. Nope. Reiko frowned as she used her telekinesis to pull his sketch away. Hey, Yanagi, come on. Come and have dinner, and you can get it back, she said calmly. Mina and Achiko were pulling on Izuku, but he was not budging. Joke's on you guys. I have a backup sketch, he said, smirking. Mina gasped dramatically. Oh no, he's got a backup. She exchanged a mischievous grin with Achiko and Reiko. Plan B. Then, Achiko declared with determination. She activated her quirk, making him float, as Reiko used her own to drag him out of the room. Guys, you have got to be kidding me, said Izuku as the girls held him as he floated down the stairs. Izuku flailed slightly, his arms crossed in defiance as he hovered helplessly above the ground. He could have used Black Whip, but with Recovery Girl saying he couldn't use his quirks for. A bit meant no fighting back. You know, this is technically kidnapping, he protested, though the slight smile tugging at the corner of his mouth betrayed his amusement. Yeah, well, it's for your own good. Mina shot back with a grin, walking beside him as if this was the most normal thing in the world. Reiko, maintaining her calm demeanor, simply said, You're eating dinner. No arguments. All right, fine. You can put me down, he said, sighing as they got to the kitchen. The dining was bustling with students from Class 1A and 1B, the air filled with chatter and the clinking of dishes. The delicious aroma of curry, rice, and miso soup wafted through the room, making Izuku's stomach betray him with a loud growl. Mina and Achiko burst into laughter. Your stomach agrees with us, Achiko teased, sticking her tongue out playfully. Izuku grumbled under his breath but grabbed a tray, piling it with food just to prove a point, or so he told himself. In reality, his appetite had returned the moment the food scent hit him. They found a spot near the windows, the warm orange hues of the setting sun casting a cozy glow over their table. Kirishima and Kaminari were already seated, engaged in an animated debate about who would win in a fight, Mount Lady or a literal mountain. I mean, it's literally in her name, Kaminari argued, waving his chopsticks for emphasis. But a mountain doesn't have feelings. It wouldn't care if it got punched. Kirishima shot back, grinning. Reiko sighed, shaking her head as she sat down. Why do I always end up at the weirdest tables? Because you secretly love us, Mina replied with a wink. Izuku chuckled, finally digging into his food. The first bite of warm, savory curry was like a burst of comfort after a long, exhausting day. He didn't even realize how hungry he was until he devoured half his plate. Todoroki joined them a few minutes later, his usual bowl of soba in hand. He slid into the seat next to Izuku without a word, his stoic presence oddly comforting amidst the chaos. Oh look, it's the Soba King, Mina teased, nudging him with her elbow. Todoroki blinked slowly. I like soba. Truly a man of many words, Kaminari said with a grin. Izuku smirked as he felt something next to his head. Something whispered in his ear, saying, "What's cooking good looking?" Izuku jumped as he saw the floating head of Setsuna. Izuku put his hands over his face as he sighed. "Please stop doing that," he said as she reattached her head. Setsuna's head floated mischievously before her body reappeared, still grinning. "Ah, come on, Izuku. You're always so much fun to mess with. Besides, it's just a harmless little greeting." "Harmless? You nearly gave me a heart attack." Izuku grumbled, still holding his face in his hands. "Don't be so dramatic," Setsuna teased, crossing her arms as she took a seat next to Reiko. "You should be flattered, you know? I only do it to the people I like." Kaminari snorted. "I think she just likes making people freak out." Conversation flowed after that, and Izuku smiled at the camaraderie. Not long after Izuku was done eating and everyone else went their separate ways, Reiko walked up to him with a sketch and handed it to him. Reiko approached Izuku with a small, knowing smile, holding out his sketchbook. "Here," she said, her voice calm and steady as always. "I forget to give you this in the dining hall." Izuku blinked, surprised. "Oh, right. I didn't even realize." "Thanks, Yanagi." She nodded at him and walked away, leaving him to head to his dorm. He opened the door to his dorm and sighed as he lay on his bed. He wanted and needed sleep, so he would get some. As he fell into the land of dreams, he appreciated the fact of how much his friends cared about him. The next day, the teachers of UA sat around the conference table in the staff room, their expressions grim as Detective Tsukachi began his briefing. The mood was heavy, the events of the USJ attack still fresh in everyone's minds. The room was silent except for the soft murmur of Tsukachi's voice as he spoke, his tone steady but filled with the weight of what had happened. "I know everyone here is familiar with the incident," Tsukachi began, adjusting his glasses and spreading out a series of photographs across the table. "But we've gathered some additional intelligence on the villains involved. The situation was more complex than we initially thought." Aizawa leaned forward, his tired eyes narrowing. "What do we know about the villains?" Tsukachi placed his hand over the photos, each one depicting various members of the villainous group who had attacked the students at the USJ. The group's leader, Tamura Shigaraki, is connected to a larger organization. "We believe they're the League of Villains, a dangerous network of individuals with quirks far beyond the norm." Shigaraki, All Might muttered, a deep frown pulling at his face. Tsukachi continued. "Shigaraki is a dangerous individual. His quirk, decay, allows him to disintegrate anything he touches. But what's more concerning is his ability to recruit others with equally dangerous quirks. We know he was behind the USJ attack, and we found connections to several high-profile villains. Then there is Kirojiri, who keeps to the shadows, a master of manipulation and deception. His quirk, Warp Gate, allows him to open portals and travel vast distances instantly. This makes him not only a formidable ally, but also a dangerous escape artist. His ability to facilitate rapid getaways and the seamless transportation of other villains has made him an invaluable member of the League. Anything about their origins? Aizawa asked, his voice sharp. Where do these people come from? Tsukachi shook his head. So far, we don't have concrete information about their backgrounds, but we've been able to identify some of their quirks, as I said, for Kirojiri and Shigaraki. This is truly something indeed, said Nizu, taking a sip of his tea. They must have gotten in with that situation with the media, said Midnight, sitting up more. Snipe nodded. I agree. That is the only way they could have gotten in. But I think we got a bigger problem now. Aizawa turned his attention to Snipe. What do you mean? Izuku Yagi defeated that thing called Nomu that was comparable to All Might, meaning that the League has him on his radar now. That either means they will be wary of him, or they will go after him, he said, turning his attention to Tashinori, who nodded. I was thinking that same thing, he said worriedly. Tsukachi nodded. That's exactly my concern. Based on what we know about Shigaraki, he's impulsive, but he holds grudges. The fact that Izuku defeated the Nomu, something designed specifically to challenge All Might, means Shigaraki won't forget him anytime soon. All Might's expression darkened, his usual light-hearted demeanor nowhere to be seen. This isn't just about protecting Izuku. If they target him, they'll endanger his classmates as well. The League doesn't care about collateral damage. Nizu steepled his fingers thoughtfully. Then we'll increase security measures around the campus and the dormitories. Not just for Izuku, but for all students. We can't risk the League exploiting any weaknesses. Tashinori nodded. I agree, but doesn't anyone else find it weird how bold the attack was on the USJ was? Like, based on the reports of Izuku and Aizawa, Shigaraki seemed like a toddler throwing a tantrum who wasn't getting his way. They were doing this as an attention grab, he said. I agree, but I will work on security measures and get other things sorted out. As of now, we will remain vigilant and be wary, but we can't stress too much about it, said Nizu. Is that all, Detective? Asked Nizu. Yes, sir. That is, Tsukachi said, bowing slightly before gathering his documents. The room remained tense even as he stepped back, the gravity of the situation lingering like an unspoken weight among the teachers. When then, everyone may return to their normal duties, said Nizu as the teachers started to leave. Class 1A. Class 1 sat waiting patiently for their teacher to show up. Izuku was glad to know that Mr. Aizawa wasn't going to look like a mummy, as he only hurt his arm from the man using his decay quirk. Good morning, Mr. Aizawa greeted, his tired eyes scanning the room as he stepped inside. His arm was in a simple sling, the only indication of his injury. Despite his usual disheveled appearance, he still carried an air of authority as he walked to the front of the room. Well, I have something very important to talk about that will change all of your lives, he said, making everyone tense. Aizawa's tired gaze swept over them, and his usual disheveled state seemed to add weight to his words. He adjusted his sling, then folded his arms across his chest. This is something you've all been waiting for, he said, letting the suspense build. The sports festival. Everyone cheered, as this is what everyone has either seen or has wanted to perform in for years. The festival is not just about winning or showing off, Aizawa continued, his voice steady but firm. It's an opportunity to demonstrate everything you've learned. You'll be tested physically, mentally, and emotionally. Everything you've trained for up to this point will be put to the test. So don't go in thinking this will be just another school event. This is something that could shape your future as heroes. I can't give every little detail, but I will say that it is in 2 weeks. So make sure that you all balance your studies and training well. The room erupted into excited chatter as soon as Aizawa finished his statement. 2 weeks. That was all they had before the sports festival, a huge event that could shape their future as heroes. Everyone was talking over each other, some excited, some nervous, and some unsure what to expect. The energy in the room was electric, but Aizawa's stern voice cut through it all, silencing the room again. I know you're all excited, Aizawa said, his tone unchanged. But don't let that excitement cloud your judgment. The sports festival isn't just about speed or strength. It's about strategy, teamwork, and how well you can think under pressure. Each of you will face challenges that will push you beyond your limits, and only those who adapt quickly will succeed. Wait a second. Should we really be doing this if just had that villain attack that happened at the USJ? Asked Kirishima. Yeah, that's a good point, said Kaminari. Mr. Aizawa nodded at the question. Yes, that is true, but what you need to realize is we're going to show people that the attack didn't affect us, and we can keep going. Plus, we all need to learn to bounce back when stuff like this happens. Not to mention we are double, if not tripling security this year, he said, adjusting his cast. The room fell silent again as Mr. Aizawa's words sunk in. Despite the lingering fear from the recent attack at the USJ, his response carried a reassuring weight to it. It was a reminder that as future heroes, they had to be resilient, not just physically but emotionally as well. The weight of the responsibility was evident in his voice, yet he conveyed a sense of confidence that made the students believe it. Though the incident at the USJ was serious, Aizawa continued, we can't let fear dictate our actions. Heroes don't stop fighting because of setback. We learn, we grow, and we adapt. This sports festival will test not just your physical abilities, but your mental and emotional ones too. Izuku pondered something for a moment before speaking. Not to mention Class 1A will be looked at more than other years this year. Aside from the third years, Izuku said, getting everyone's attention. Izuku's words hung in the air for a moment, and everyone turned to look at him. He wasn't one to speak up so directly in a situation like this, but the weight of the situation was heavy, and his observation was clear. Yeah, he's right, Reiko said, her usual calm voice cutting through the silence. With the attack at the USJ and the way things have been, all eyes are on us this year. They want to see if we have what it takes and show them the quirks we use to deal with the attack. Mr. Aizawa cleared his throat to get everyone's attention. Regardless, that is true. You all will have the chance to show what you have. Make it worth your while. You only have 3 times to do it, this being one, so make it worth your while. Lunchtime. Izuku walking down the hall with Ichiro and Ida. Jiro and Momo had run ahead to save a seat in the cafeteria. I still can't believe the sports festival is happening so soon after everything, Izuku muttered, adjusting his bag over his shoulder. It makes sense, though, Ida replied, his hand chopping the air with his usual intensity. As Aizawa-sensei said, we must show that UA remains strong. It's also a crucial event for us to demonstrate our potential to pro-heroes and agencies. Ichiro nodded thoughtfully. Yeah, and it's kind of exciting, you know? Even with everything that happened, it's like we get to prove something, not just to others, but to ourselves. Say, Uraraka, why do you want to be a hero? Asked Izuku curiously. Ichiro blinked, a bit surprised by the question. She tilted her head slightly, her eyes thoughtful. Why do I want to be a hero? She repeated, as if turning the words over in her mind. She smiled softly, with a hint of shyness in her expression. I guess it started with my parents. Ida and Izuku slowed down, the words pulling their focus as they walked alongside her. Ichiro glanced down at the floor for a moment, her fingers tightening around the strap of her bag. My parents run a construction company. They're hardworking and always putting in extra hours to make ends meet. They work so hard to build things for other people, but sometimes I wish I could help them more, but they told me to find a different profession. She looked up at Izuku then, meeting his gaze with a soft but determined look. I want to be a hero, someone who can make a real difference, not just in the world, but for the people I care about. I want to do something for others, especially for my parents. That's pretty thoughtful of you, said Izuku, making her blush. Ichiro smiled sheepishly at Izuku's words, her cheeks turning a little pink as she glanced away, feeling slightly embarrassed. I guess it sounds a little cheesy when I say it out loud, huh? No, it's not cheesy at all, Izuku said quickly, shaking his head. I think it's really admirable, wanting to help the people you care about. That's a really strong reason to want to be a hero. Her blush deepened, but she couldn't help the small smile tugging at her lips. Thanks, Yagi. That means a lot. She glanced down at the floor for a second before looking back up at him, her eyes bright with a touch of determination. I guess part of it is that I don't want to see them struggle so much anymore. They've done everything they can for me, and now I want to give back, you know? Ida, who had been quietly listening to their exchange, couldn't help but add his own perspective. I respect your sentiment, Uraraka, he said, his usual energy back in full force. Helping others is the foundation of what it means to be a hero. Your resolve is truly commendable. Achiko gave him a small, appreciative nod, but her thoughts were still fixed on her parents and what she wanted to accomplish. Yeah, I think a lot about how I could use my quirk in ways that can help more people. Even if I don't have the flashiest ability, I know there are ways to make a real difference. I've been practicing and I'll keep pushing myself until I can do that. Thanks again for the compliment, Deku, she said, not knowing the implications of that word. Did you call me Deku? He said, sweating a bit. Achiko blinked at Izuku's reaction, tilting her head in confusion. Huh? Yeah, I did. Why? Is something wrong? Izuku rubbed the back of his head nervously, feeling a familiar knot form in his stomach. Well, it's just that Deku was kind of nickname people used to, make fun of me. He let out a small, awkward chuckle, hoping to downplay his discomfort. Achiko's eyes widened in realization. Oh no, I'm so sorry, Yagi. I didn't mean it like that at all. I heard Bakugo call you that several times, so I thought that it meant something like, you can do it. She waved her hands frantically, her expression filled with guilt. He scratched the back of his neck, his face tinged pink. Well, when you put it that way, I guess it doesn't sound so bad. Achiko's face lit up with relief, her worried frown quickly replaced by a bright smile. Really? You don't mind if I call you that, then? It kind of suits you. When she put it like that, maybe Deku would be a good term to use. Maybe he could turn it from something of torment or something of good. Why, yeah, he stammered, feeling the warmth creep up his neck and settle on his cheeks. I think I like it. Achiko's grin grew wider, her eyes sparkling with genuine warmth. Awesome. Then it's settled. Deku it is. Izuku smiled at a new chance to have the damnable name become something better. The group of three were interrupted when they heard a loud, booming voice down the hallway. Ahaha! Young Izuku is here, yelled out All Might as he pointed at him. Izuku just stared at his father, wondering what the hell he was doing to stop him in the hallway. All Might, he asked confusedly. Lunch, he said, holding up some food. You want to eat with me? He asked cutely. Achiko was gushing behind him as Izuku was trying to put two and two together. If he wants to speak with me like this, it has to be incredibly important. Maybe I should follow him, he thought as he looked at him warily. Go on, Yagi. It might be important, said Ida, gesturing for him to go. I'll catch you guys later, Izuku mumbled to Achiko and Ida, who both gave encouraging smiles. Achiko's gaze lingered a little longer, her soft smile giving him a surprising boost of confidence. Achiko and Ida made their way to lunchroom, seeing Jiro and Momo in line. Hey guys, said Achiko, running up to them. Jiro turned her head slightly, her usual cool demeanor intact as she gave a small wave. Oh hey, Uraraka. Ida, where's Izuku? He is with All Might right now, replied Ida. Jiro raised an eyebrow, her curiosity piqued. With All Might? That sounds serious. I mean, it's not every day the symbol of peace calls someone out like that. Momo nodded thoughtfully, adjusting the tray in her hands. Considering how intense the USJ attack was, it wouldn't surprise me if All Might wanted to personally acknowledge Izuku's efforts. He did perform exceptionally well under pressure. He has a pretty strong liking to him, said Achiko, catching the attention of dual quirk user in front of them. Todoroki showed interest as the group walked away, wondering about the relationship between All Might and Izuku. Teacher's Lounge. All Might opened the door to the Teacher's Lounge to show Inori and Ichiro waiting there as well. You've got to be kidding me, Izuku thought as he took a seat the furthest away from his siblings. All Might transformed to his skinny form and sighed as he sat down in front of all three of them. Ichiro sent a glare at Izuku, who paid no mind to him. But Inori hit Ichiro to set him straight after the slightest bit of satisfaction with Izuku. All right, you three. I needed to say this to you all so that you're made aware, but according to some recent tests, I have about 2 hours and 40 minutes left on my transformation, he said, informing them. Izuku's eyes widened ever so slightly as he looked at his father. His time was shrinking less and less, and soon the number one hero of all might would be no more. Ichiro looked a bit more worried than usual. But you need to be the symbol of peace. Inori, always the more level-headed of the two siblings, shifted her gaze to All Might, her brows furrowed with genuine concern. Is there anything we can do to help? Or is this related to your injury? All Might gave her a weak smile, his gaunt face shadowed with fatigue. Sharp as always, Inori. Yes, it's due to the injury I sustained years ago. The damage is irreversible, and my time as the symbol of peace is limited. That's why I brought you three here. His gaze drifted to Izuku, softening slightly. Why us? Asked Inori curiously as she moved some blonde strands of hair out of the way. Truth be told, with my time slowly starting to decrease, there will need to be someone, or rather multiple someones to take over as the symbol of peace for when that time comes, he said, pointing at the three of them. The room fell into a heavy silence, All Might's words settling like an invisible weight on the shoulders of his three children. Izuku's heart pounded in his chest, his thoughts racing. Multiple symbols of peace. Ichiro's face twisted with a mixture of confusion and frustration. Wait, you're saying we have to replace you? His tone was sharp, tinged with disbelief. That's impossible. No one can replace All Might. But why is Izuku here anyway? He isn't exactly strong. He received a smack on the head from Inori. Just keep your mouth shut, you idiot. Ichiro winced, rubbing the back of his head as he shot a glare at Inori. Hey, I'm just saying what everyone else is thinking, he muttered under his breath. Inori's expression didn't change, her cool demeanor unshaken. Yeah, well, not everyone else is in this room. So, you'll keep quiet unless you've got something useful to say. Izuku was actually surprised that Inori stood up for him, but decided to ignore it for now and focus. Anyway, the point that I am making is you three have the sports festival to show off and shine to the people that you are here, he said, walking to the window. Agencies and the people of the world will be watching you and seeing what you have to offer. Like I said, why is Izuku here then? Asked Ichiro. Tashinori sighed as he looked to his eldest. Ichiro, shut up, he said, getting annoyed with him. I'm trying to make it up to my son for being a shitty father, but including him with stuff I never had before. The least you could do as a brother is to be happy for him. Dad, don't worry about it, it's fine, I'm used to it, said Izuku was silenced. No, it's not fine. These past years for you are not fine, and I am making it up to you, so stop saying it is fine, he said, looking at the three of them again. Regardless, the point that I am making is you three are the heroes of the future. You three will show the world I am here, he said proudly, transforming back into All Might. Ichiro scoffed as he stood up from his seat, adjusting his blonde hair as he got up from his seat. Yeah, I already know I am. You didn't have to get this meeting together to say it, he said, putting his hands in his jacket as he walked out of the door. Tashinori sighed at his eldest as Inori and Izuku looked at each other. Izuku felt weird that he was included in this. In a good kind of weird. He looked to Inori and his father who had been trying and making an effort. He could see that. But there was a part of him that knew they had a long way to go because he didn't feel anything. Not yet anyway. Thank you for joining us on this journey through what if Deku gained power to create Quirk. We hope you found it as captivating as we did. A big thank you to the Ultimate One for creating such an engaging story. Don't forget to visit their profile on fanfiction.net for more fantastic works. The link is in the description below. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a thumbs up, share it with your friends, and subscribe to Zenin Fanfics for more intriguing explorations into fanfiction and fantasy. Your support helps us create more content like this, and we love hearing your thoughts and suggestions in the comment section. See you soon in the next video.